Chapter 1170. This shout was no less than a head-on blow. The old man immediately stopped crying and stopped crying. He wiped away his tears and asked Yu Qianqiu, "Who are you? Why are you here?" "I'm Yu Qianqiu." Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched and he asked, "What about you?" "Hong Tai Long." After the old red dragon introduced himself, he asked weakly, "Did Coiling Dragon Ancestor ask you to come?" "Hong Tai Long?" Yu Qianqiu was startled. He sized up the other party and realized that he really lived up to his name. He avoided the question and asked, "Who is Yi Tiankong? How did you get tricked by him?" Hong Tai Long looked at the golden chain in his hand. A mixture of anger and melancholy flashed across his face. There was even a hint of nostalgia. He sighed and said, "Yi Tiankong is the fourth son of the demon world's third demon monarch. I was tricked by him. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been trapped here for so many years." Demon world's third demon monarch. Yu Qianqiu thought for a while and suddenly exclaimed, "Demon monarch 3 Nights? The Yi Tiankong you speak of is demon monarch 3 Nights' son?" "That's right. He is demon monarch 3 Nights' youngest son." Hong Tai Long nodded sadly. The fat kid swimming in the lava weakly came over and climbed up the green lotus to stand behind him. He peeked his head out and looked at Yu Qianqiu. "Wait." Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and asked with a face full of suspicion, "Weren't you trapped by demon monarch Myriad Swords? Why did you become demon monarch 3 Nights' son, Yi Tiankong?" "Demon monarch Myriad Swords. Demon monarch 3 Nights." He was shocked and said, "You mean?" His face was full of disbelief. "You guessed correctly." Hong Tai Long sighed and shook his head. "Yi Tiankong is the Myriad Swords demon monarch. When I first met him, he said his name was Tiankong. He purposely hid the truth that his surname was Yi and deceived my trust. After obtaining the heaven and earth splitting arrow, he gave himself the name of Myriad Swords demon monarch." Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered as he tried to figure out what was going on. However, there was one thing he couldn't figure out. He said in a low voice, "If I remember correctly, when the Myriad Swords demon monarch appeared, the demonic world was already sealed. The demon monarch of 3 Nights was sealed in the demonic world. How could his son be in the human world? Could it be that before the demonic world was sealed, the night sky had always been in the human world? I was the one who brought him from the devil realm to the human world." Hong Tai Long had an indescribable expression on his face. He said in a vexed and regretful tone, "Back then, I received Patriarch Coiling Dragon's decree and brought along the heaven and earth splitting arrow and a jade archive to go to the lower realm to look for the person who could administer punishment on behalf of the heavens in order to pacify the disputes in the lower realm and rebuild a new order. Who knew that when I was about to leave Mount Dragon God, would suddenly meet a good friend of mine from the dragon race. He heard some interesting stories about the demonic world and told me about it. In the end, it made my heart itch unbearably. After I reached the lower realm, I abused my power for personal gain. Relying on the heaven and earth splitting arrow's ability to traverse the passage between the 2 realms, I ran to the demonic world. The person who could administer punishment on behalf of the heavens?" Yu Qianqiu's brows twitched. He sneered, "So you met Yi Tiankong?" Hong Tai Long nodded, a little ashamed, and said, "In the end, I traveled around the demonic world and discovered that it wasn't as fun as my friend had described. It was filled with blood and slaughter. Just as I was about to leave, I met Yi Tiankong, who was hesitating in front of the passage to the demonic world. I asked him what he was planning to do. As it turned out, he was also pondering how to leave the demonic world and travel to the outside world to broaden his horizons. It was fine when the 2 of us didn't talk, but once we did. That brat was too cunning. It didn't take him long to find out about my background. He beat around the bush and said that he was the person I was looking for, tricking me into bringing him out of the demonic world." When Yu Qianqiu heard this, he couldn't help but sneer, "Are you that gullible? You didn't even find out about his background, and you dared to give him the heaven and earth splitting arrow? And you even gave it to the descendant of the demonic god. You're really something. How would I know that he was the descendant of the demonic god?" He said that he is an ordinary citizen of the demon world. After I checked him, I discovered that he does not have the slightest bit of cultivation. He is indeed an ordinary person. Who would have thought that the bloodline of such a talented person like the demon god is actually a cripple who cannot cultivate? Hong Tai-long argued. Yi Tian-kong is a useless person who can't cultivate? Yu Qianshou was stunned, and he asked suspiciously, "You're not trying to get out of this on purpose, are you?" If Yi Tian-kong was a cripple, how could he control the heaven and earth splitting arrow? How could he become the person who punishes on behalf of the heavens? If you're not trying to exonerate yourself, then you're really stupid. How could you believe such a lie? Hong Tai-long raised his hands that were chained. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. I naturally wouldn't believe it so easily. But what's strange is that the heaven and earth splitting arrow actually recognized him as its master. How can I not believe it? The decree I received was to find the owner of the heaven splitting arrow society. How could I have known that the heaven and earth splitting arrow would recognize a cripple who could not cultivate as its master? I don't even have a place to complain to. That's right. Yu Qianshou couldn't help but let out a soft cry of surprise. It was understandable that other people didn't know about the difficulties the divine arrow made, but he had experienced it himself. If the divine sword didn't recognize him as its master, Yi Tian-kong wouldn't have been able to rely on the heaven and earth splitting arrow to become the demon lord of 10,000 swords that shook the three realms. But after thinking about it, he felt that something was wrong. He frowned and said, "Didn't you say that Yi Tian-kong couldn't cultivate? Then how did he get such a high cultivation to strike fear into the hearts of the immortal realm and netherworld?" When he said this, Hong Tai-long's face was filled with shame again. He stammered for a long time before he said, "When I came down from the immortal realm, I actually forgot to ask how I was supposed to go back. And Yi Tian-kong's nonsense actually made me believe it. I mistakenly thought that my mission was to assist him in punishing on behalf of the heavens. Thus, I used the dragon race's divine dragon empowerment technique and transferred half of my cultivation to him, allowing him to reach the early stage of small god. At the same time, my cultivation dropped from the middle stage of small god to the late stage of small god. Otherwise, Jin Tai and Bai Qi wouldn't be my match. Divine dragon empowerment technique. You gave him half of your cultivation?" Yu Qianshou was speechless. Just how good was this Yi Tian-kong at deceiving people? To be able to deceive him into giving him half of his cultivation, for some reason, Yu Qianshou suddenly felt a sense of sympathy for Yi Tian. After listening to Hong Tai-long's story, why did he feel that this guy's style was somewhat similar to his own? How could there be a person who thought of himself as a swindler? After Yu Qianshou came back to his senses, he coughed twice to cover up his awkwardness, and said, "What realm were Jin Tai and Bai Qi's cultivation? Why couldn't the two of you defeat them with your early stage small god cultivation?" At that time, they had both stepped into the middle stage of small god. Their cultivation was a level higher than mine when we separated. Hong Tai-long said with certainty, as if he wanted Yu Qianshou to believe that this was the reason why he couldn't defeat the other party. He was still rather concerned about his reputation. Yu Qianshou nodded thoughtfully. The people of the three realms all said that Jin Tai, Bai Qi, the myriad swords demon lord, and the divine dragon's cultivation were all at the late stage of the celestial emperor realm. Actually, that wasn't the case at all. It looked like the rumors really couldn't be trusted. So the great formation of heaven and earth in the holy eastern lands and the demonic spirit immortal punishing formation here were all created by Yi Tian-kong? Yu Qianshou asked again. He had to find out how much of the story in those legends was exaggerated. He didn't want to become the demonic ghost region's torturer, but in reality, he was just a tool for someone else. Yes. Those were all things that came along with the heaven and earth splitting arrow in the Transmission Jade Archive. Yi Tian-kong had learned all of them from the Transmission Jade Archive. Hong Tai-long sighed softly and said, "If you hadn't seen it with your own eyes, you wouldn't be able to believe how high Yi Tian-kong's innate talent for cultivation is. And it's precisely because of this that I'm even more convinced of his identity as the heaven's torturer. I've studied the things in the Transmission Jade Archive for a long time, but I still couldn't make any headway. But in his hands, it wasn't a difficult task at all. He could practically understand it with just one look. He's practically a genius. Damn it. That's because you're stupid, alright? Otherwise, you wouldn't have been tricked so easily. Yu Qianqiu clenched his fist and coughed. In his mind, he was thinking about creating a few more great formations of heaven and earth and demonic spirit immortal punishing formation in the immortal realm, the netherworld, or the devil realm. That would be fun. He then waved his hand and said, "Where's the transmission jade archive? Take it out and let me have a look. Let me see if it's really as difficult as you said." "I don't have it anymore." Hong Tailong spread his hands and said, "I gave it to Yi Tiankong. After he understood it, he destroyed it." Seeing Yu Qianqiu looking at him suspiciously, Hong Tailong immediately assured him that he really didn't have it. "You wastrel." Yu Qianqiu pointed at him with a trembling hand. He didn't know what else to say. Something passed down from the coiling dragon god was gone just like that. The more he thought about it, the more pained he felt. He couldn't help but roar, "Damn it. That thing was mine, but you gave it to someone else and destroyed it. What crime do you deserve? You deserve to die 10,000 times over." Hong Tailong was stunned by Miao Yi's scolding. He said in shock, "That was something the coiling dragon ancestor bestowed to the heavens torturer. What right do you have to say that it's yours? You foolish dragon." Yu Qianqiu pointed at him with a trembling finger for a long while. Finally, he managed to organize his words and shouted, "Don't you know that I've already met the coiling dragon god? Do you think I would come looking for you if I hadn't met the coiling dragon god? Damn it. I'm the true heavens torturer. Those things were all given to me. Open your eyes and take a look at what this is." He casually took out the divine arrow and waved it in front of Hong Tailong's eyes. "Heaven and earth splitting arrow?" Hong Tailong muttered to himself. He was dumbfounded as he looked at the divine arrow. He could tell that the divine arrow had been confirmed as its owner from how lightly it was being held in Miao Yi's hand. Suddenly, he opened his mouth, "Woo woo." Then, he started to cry loudly. As he cried, he kept shouting, "I was wrong. I deserve to die. I'm wrong. I deserve to die." The old shameless man started crying again. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes. He couldn't do anything to this old thing. After all, he was also lying to him. Just as he was about to put away the divine arrow, his gaze suddenly focused on the arrow. He suddenly recalled the conversation between the coiling dragon god and the demon god. The meaning in the legend of the coiling dragon god was very clear. Those things were indeed given to the demon god's descendants. In other words, it wasn't wrong for the divine arrow to recognize Yi Tiankong as its owner. Since that was the case, why didn't Miao Yi explain it to Hong Tailong? Miao Yi could tell that Hong Tailong's brain wasn't very bright. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been tricked so easily. But why did the coiling dragon god choose such a person to do things for him? Could it be that the coiling dragon god really didn't have any subordinates he could use? If it wasn't for a friend suddenly popping out of nowhere and telling him about the demon realm, Hong Tailong probably wouldn't have gone to the demon realm and wouldn't have met Yi Tiankong. The item wouldn't have landed in Yi Tiankong's hands and wouldn't have been given to the demon god's descendants. Chapter 1171. However, the coiling dragon god had clearly told the demonic god that the heaven-splitting arrow was meant for his descendants. Yet, of all people, he chose Yi Tiankong, who was unable to cultivate. Even though Yi Tiankong was very talented, he was still unable to cultivate. He remembered that the demonic god had said that this was a trap. Could there really be something fishy going on? Damn it. What the hell were these big shots up to? Yu Qianqiu looked at the heaven-splitting arrow in his hand and suddenly shivered. He felt as if he had fallen into some kind of trap. He began to consider whether or not he should keep the heaven-splitting arrow, lest he was used by others without even knowing it. However, it was a pity to abandon such a divine artifact. Yu Qianqiu kept it without hesitation. No matter what, it was better to keep a good treasure. Not only could it save his life at a critical moment, it could also prevent it from falling into the hands of others. Alright. Don't cry. Since it's all in the past, let's forget about it. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, pretending to be magnanimous. I won't argue with you anymore. After all, you can't be blamed entirely. If you want to blame someone, blame Yi Tiankong for being too cunning. Speaking up to this point, his heart surged with a bunch of knots. Yi Tiankong created the demon domain, but he and his disciple helped him guard the demon domain and worked as torture envoys for such a long time. What a scam! Hong Tailong immediately stopped crying. He wiped away his tears and asked, then what about the transmission jade archive? The fat child stared at his grandfather, dumbfounded. He was so shocked that he couldn't say a word. This was probably the first time he had seen his grandfather cry. It's gone. What else can I do? If you don't have it, then don't use it. Although Yu Qianqiu was magnanimous, he still couldn't help but feel his heart ache. He asked in confusion, since Yi Tiankong was able to trick you to this extent, how did you know his identity? He said it himself. Hong Tailong's eyes instantly blurred, and with a reminiscing expression, he slowly said, I don't know where Jin Tai and Bai Qi got the soul-transforming smoke from. Yi Tiankong and I never dreamed that they could actually get their hands on the soul-transforming smoke, so we fell into their trap. I'm afraid that the two of them think that we're dead for sure, but they don't know that my dragon race is immune to the soul-transforming smoke refined by the phoenix feather. The soul-transforming smoke has no effect on me, and Yi Tiankong was able to hold on for a period of time because of the dragon essence I poured into him, but he also knows that he won't be able to live for long. He made me suck in all the soul-dissolving smoke that Jin Tai and Bai Qi had set up. Then, he made me spit it out at the Immortal Ascension stage in the human world. He used the soul-dissolving smoke to set up a grand array to prevent people from the immortal world from coming to the human world again. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his chin and asked quietly, the array formation at the seal of the demon realm must have been set up by him, right? What's your intention? He said that Demon Lord Three Knights had once said that he had thrown a demonic book into this human world, hoping that someone would be able to learn the demonic art and open up the passageway to the demon realm. Hong Tailong shook his head slightly and smiled bitterly. Yi Tiankong said that he had fallen in love with this world, but he couldn't ruin his father's plans. So, he set up a grand array that could seal the demon realm once again. If he could block it, then he'd block it. If he couldn't, then he'd just let it go. It would be up to heaven's will. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. He had experienced that scene, so he knew that Hong Tailong wasn't lying. Yi Tiankong didn't lie to Hong Tailong either. After Yan Zhuixing opened up the passageway to the demon realm, the grand array did seal the passageway to the demon realm once again. Hong Tailong continued to narrate, I said that I wanted to take revenge for him, but he said that I wasn't a match for those two cunning fellows, so he didn't want anything to happen to me. I also asked him why he didn't destroy the Immortal Ascension stage and seal the passageway to the Netherworld. That way, no one from the Netherworld or Immortal Realm would be able to come to this human world. He didn't tell me the answer at first. It was only when he tricked me here and used my dragon binding rope to bind me that he told me the reason. Yu Qianqiu's brows twitched slightly. Two streams of clear tears silently slid down Hong Tailong's face as he sobbed. After he revealed his identity, he said that he was very happy to have met me. It was the happiest time in his life. I was the one who allowed him to realize his dream of flying in the sky and burrowing into the earth. He was willing to die for this once in his life. He didn't care how long it would be, as long as he was happy. He didn't feel pain because he was poisoned by the soul-transforming smoke. After all, he had changed his fate before. He said that it wasn't that he didn't have the ability to destroy the Immortal Ascension stage, and it wasn't that he didn't have the ability to seal the Netherworld. Similarly, it wasn't that he didn't have the ability to completely annihilate Jin Tai and Bai Qi. It was that he couldn't do it, because he wasn't the person I was looking for. Because he didn't know what the mission of punishing on behalf of the heavens was. He just wanted to have a good time in this world, and he didn't want to make any big changes. The mission of punishing on behalf of the heavens should belong to whoever it belonged to. He was just borrowing it for fun. When he couldn't play anymore, he naturally had to return it to someone else. He said that he really liked this world, and it was much friendlier than the devil realm. He really didn't want to see this world being ravaged by outsiders, so he created the demon realm. If one day someone wanted to destroy the peace here, he wanted to do his best to give this world a little bit of protection, so that it wouldn't be easily ruined by outsiders. At least he wouldn't have come in vain, and this world would give him a little bit of happiness in return. He was also afraid that the combination of the divine arrow and the demon and ghost immortal execution formation would be too powerful and completely destroy this world, so he deliberately left one of the 10,000 swords that contained the soul of the great god in the heaven and earth formation. He said that if the person who punishes on behalf of the heavens is destined, then that person will find me sooner or later. When that time comes, he wants me to tell that person that there is another divine sword in a lake in the heaven and earth formation, and let him find it. If he finds it, then it will be returned to its original owner, but if he can't find it, then he can't be blamed. The remaining 9,999 swords are in the center of the lake outside, and have become the formation's eye of the demon realm. If I think of a way to take them out from the stone pillar, the formation will naturally be broken. As for the Jade Archive, there are many things in it that are too disadvantageous to the people of the devil realm. He and Demon King 3 knights are father and son, and he doesn't want to see someone kill his father one day, so he confiscated it. He said that if that person can enter the heaven and earth formation, then he must have grasped the method to control the purple flames. As for the dragon binding rope that trapped me, he used the energy of the purple flames of the mortal realm to set up a formation to control it. If he can break the heaven and earth formation, then he can similarly release me. When that time comes, everything will be dust to dust, and dust to dust. He told me to tell that person that he only borrowed it for fun, and that he really doesn't owe that person anything. After he said all this, he used the divine dragon's empowerment art to return the cultivation I gave him to me, and then, right before my eyes, smiling, he sank into this river of lava, instantly turning into ashes, never to be seen again. At this point, Hong Tailong's tears were already streaming down his aged face, and he was sobbing uncontrollably. Behind him, the bare-bottomed child also started sobbing. It was unknown whether it was because he had truly understood the story and felt sad, or because he was touched by the sight of his grandfather crying and cried along with him. After listening to Hong Tailong's story, Yu Qianqiu stood in silence for a long time. Then, he let out a long sigh. He didn't expect that such a story would be hidden behind this torturous matter. He asked himself honestly, as the person who impersonated the punishment on behalf of the heavens, he had no reason to blame anyone. Looking at Hong Tailong, who had fallen in love with him, Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. He could tell that Yi Tiankong wasn't a bad person, and he could also tell that Yi Tiankong had treated Hong Tailong very well in the past. Furthermore, the happy times that Yi Tiankong had gone through must have been one of Hong Tailong's happiest times. Although Hong Tailong had cursed Yi Tiankong as a bastard, saying that he had lied to him, he couldn't hide the fact that their true friendship was right before his eyes. Back then, it wasn't that Hong Tailong didn't suspect Yi Tiankong. It was most likely because he was willing to be kept in the dark and foolishly fooled around with Yi Tiankong. After all, to some people with true temperament, sometimes friendship or love was far higher than the endless pursuit of profound cultivation. For example, when Lanfeng's love for Lu Yanqing was unwavering until death. I've already broken the heaven and earth great array. I've also found the divine sword that was abandoned at the Moonlight Lake. The heaven and earth splitting arrow has also been restored to its original state. Yu Qianqiu looked at the 2 golden chains in Hong Tailong's hands and said indifferently, Yi Tiankong is right. I can indeed control the energy of the purple flames. Perhaps I can help you undo the shackles of the dragon binding rope. Do you want to continue staying here and grieve, or do you want to leave with me? Hong Tailong hurriedly wiped away his tears. Looking at Yu Qianqiu, he said weakly, Did Ancestor Coiling Dragon agree to let me out? F***CK. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes. He immediately realized that he had fallen into this old dragon's trap. Hong Tailong was pretending to be pitiful, but in reality, he mistakenly believed that Yu Qianqiu was really related to Ancestor Coiling Dragon. After beating around the bush for so long, he wanted to know Ancestor Coiling Dragon's attitude. He was afraid that he would be punished for failing to complete Ancestor Coiling Dragon's mission. Damn it, you're dishonest. You used to have fun with Yi Tiankong, but now you're afraid? Yu Qianzhou raised his brows and said, "Let me ask you, why did Ancestor Coiling Dragon look for you to do this mission?" Hong Tailong was stunned. He didn't know what he meant by this question. He hesitantly replied, "I don't know either. This is the first time Ancestor Coiling Dragon has summoned me. It's also the first time I've directly accepted a mission from Ancestor Coiling Dragon. I don't know why." First time? Yu Qianzhou's eyes narrowed. It looked like Coiling Dragon had purposely chosen this guy. This matter might really be, as the demonic god had said, a well-planned trap. Yu Qianzhou's eyes darted around. He stared at Hong Tailong and chuckled coldly. "Tell me honestly, did you really forget to ask about the way back to the Immortal Realm? Or did you actually know the way back, but because you went overboard and were afraid that you wouldn't be able to answer to Ancestor Coiling Dragon, you had a guilty conscience and discussed with Yi Tiankong to trap yourself here?" Hong Tailong's expression changed slightly, and he said solemnly, "How is that possible? Don't try that in front of me. No one can lie in front of me and get away with it." Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and interrupted Hong Tailong's words. He sneered and said, "Damn it. You and Yi Tiankong are simply bad partners who work hand in glove with each other. Yi Tiankong has arranged everything flawlessly. Once he's done enjoying himself, how could he forget about you, the accomplice of a villain? If he didn't help you calculate a way to answer to the mission, he probably wouldn't have died a happy death. You wouldn't have stayed here obediently for so many years, right? If you had nothing better to do, wouldn't you at least vent your anger by shouting a few times?" Chapter 1172. How could Hong Tailong admit to such a heavy crime? He shook his head and denied it, saying that Yu Qianzhou had wrongly accused him. In the end, Yu Qianzhou threw out a sentence and Hong Tailong immediately admitted defeat. "Fine. You don't want to admit it? I'll go argue with Coiling Dragon God and ask him to clarify this matter with you." Yu Qianzhou turned around and was about to leave. Hong Tailong panicked on the spot. He grabbed his shoulder and turned around, smiling apologetically. "We can talk about it slowly. There's no need to trouble old Ancestor. Some things have happened too long ago. I might have remembered it wrongly. Let me think about it." Yu Qianzhou sneered and asked coldly, "Then did you remember anything?" Hong Tailong revealed a look of contemplation and said slowly, "Now that you've reminded me, I do remember something. There seem to be two ways to return to the Divine Realm. I heard that old Ancestor Coiling Dragon opened up a space in the Netherworld, which is the Netherworld Divine Manor. There's a secret passage that leads to the Divine Realm, directly to the Dragon Clan's Divine Dragon Mountain in the Divine Realm. Only people of my Dragon Clan can find it. Also, when the Netherworld River Black Carp of the Netherworld River aquatic race successfully leaps through the Dragon's Gate, our Dragon Clan will send a Pegasus carriage down to the Divine Realm." Yu Qianzhou was stunned. Putting aside the passage to the Divine Realm in the Netherworld Divine Manor, he had personally experienced the Black Carp leaping through the Dragon's Gate and the Pegasus carriage. He had even sat on the Pegasus carriage, but he never dreamed that it led to the Divine Realm. If he had known earlier, he would have gone to the Divine Realm to take a look. After feeling regretful, he came back to his senses and asked again, "That's it? Tell me honestly, how much of what you said before was false? Squeeze it dry and say it again. Otherwise, you'll have to explain to Coiling Dragon God yourself." Hong Tailong immediately begged on the verge of tears, "Everything else I've said is the truth. Just like what you've said, I'm afraid that I won't be able to answer to the old Ancestor, so I discussed with Yi Tiankong and purposely got trapped here so that I can answer when I'm found. Otherwise, do you think I like being trapped here? Even if Patriarch Coiling Dragon were to interrogate him directly, the result would still be the same. In that case, let Patriarch Coiling Dragon come and interrogate him face to face." Yu Qianzhou smirked as he flew along the green flame spewing out from the green lotus. Hong Tailong was dumbfounded on the spot. Then, He started pounding his chest and stamping his feet in apprehension. He looked as if he was regretting that a disaster was about to befall him. Suddenly, he raised his head and saw Yu Qianqiu flashing back. He was stunned. Yu Qianqiu looked at him for a while, then frowned and said in a deep voice, "After thinking about it, I still feel that I should give you a chance to redeem yourself. Besides, it's not easy to meet the coiling dragon god. I wonder if you're willing to cherish this opportunity." The reason why he had left earlier was actually to trick Hong Tailong. Reality proved that Hong Tailong really did not hide anything. Otherwise, he would have definitely called out to him. Thus, he had turned back. Hong Tailong wasn't really an idiot. He more or less saw through his intentions. He immediately smiled bitterly and said, "Of course I'm willing. I wonder how I can redeem myself." Yu Qianqiu looked at him with an awe-inspiring gaze. His expression suddenly turned solemn as he said word by word, "Complete your unfinished mission and help me mete out punishment on behalf of the heavens. After that, other than yourself, no one will mention the matter of you colluding with Yi Tiankong." He wanted him to work for him. Hong Tailong cupped his fists and said with a bitter expression, "I dare not to obey. I hope you remember your words. I'll help you get out of trouble right now." Yu Qianqiu didn't have the time to continue arguing with him. He directly dived into the boiling lava. Hong Tailong was stunned for a moment before he also jumped in. The bare-bottomed child silently sat on the green lotus and looked at the surging lava river. No one knew what he had understood or what he had thought of. At the bottom of the surging lava river that was several hundred meters deep, there was a space shrouded in purple mist. Within it, there was a transparent purple crystal that was the size of a small hill. 2 golden chains were pressed underneath it. Yu Qianqiu extended his palm to sense it. He was instantly shocked. So this entire purple crystal was actually condensed from the purple fire element. How much purple fire element was needed to condense such a large crystal? The entire purple crystal seemed to be secretly communicating with the entire heaven and earth. It was firmly embedded there. In order to move it, one would undoubtedly need a power that could shake the entire world. No wonder it could suppress Hong Tailong and prevent him from escaping. Yu Qianqiu, who was pushing his palm forward, slowly closed his eyes. The hazy purple mist began to slowly revolve and spread in all directions, silently returning to the heaven and earth. Purple mist rapidly rose from the purple crystal, and at the same time, it was also slowly shrinking. Half a day later, the entire purple crystal had completely dissipated. Hong Tailong's arms trembled, and the golden chains were controlled by him like they were his fingers. They quickly fell from his wrists, and he opened his mouth and directly sucked them into his stomach. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He couldn't help but ask, "How did you eat it into your stomach?" Hong Tailong looked at his arms that had regained their freedom and laughed heartily. "There's a space in the stomach of my dragon race. It's just like your storage space. It's used to store things. So that's how it is." Yu Qianqiu looked at his stomach and felt a chill. He waved his hand and said, "Since you're already free, come with me." Hong Tailong was in high spirits. He readily agreed. He then asked curiously, "Where are we going?" The boiling lava flowed in the sky, but not a single drop fell. It illuminated the underground space with a red light. Yu Qianqiu raised his head and narrowed his eyes. Jin Tai and Bai Qi have opened the seal to the demonic realm. Now, Demon Lord Three Knights is leading the demonic realm army to sweep across the Immortal and Netherworld. I've personally witnessed Demon Lord Three Knights slaughtering over 200 million Immortal realm cultivators. They don't even want to let the human realm off. Previously, it was precisely because the demonic realm army attacked that I activated the demonic ghost immortal punishing formation to deal with them. They probably won't barge into the human realm before they understand the situation here. Jin Tai and Bai Qi opened the passage to the demonic realm. Hong Tailong couldn't help but be shocked. His red brows furrowed. He recalled that Demon Lord Three Knights was Yi Tiankong's father. He then asked in a heavy voice, "You mean you want me to help you deal with the demonic realm army?" "I don't mind telling you the truth. I've been to the demonic realm before. I have the strength to fight against Demon Lord Three Knights' great Demon King, but I'm definitely not Demon Lord Three Knights' opponent. Yu Qianzhou shook his head. We'll deal with Demon Lord Three Knights one step at a time. What we need to do now is to stop them from harassing this human realm. The passage to the demonic realm is still sealed, but we need to destroy the Immortal Ascension stage to cut off any possibility of them barging in. Most importantly, we need to find a way to seal the passage to the Netherworld and completely cut off any possibility of them entering this human realm. You should know how to seal the passage between the two realms, right? It's a pity I don't know sealing techniques. Hong Tailong stared at the slightly disappointed Yu Qianzhou with a burning gaze. But I know a way to block the passage between the two realms. If someone uses a divine artifact to guard the entrance of the passage, it can also prevent people from the two realms from passing through. Yu Qianzhou's gaze slowly met his. He said in a heavy voice, "You mean, you want me to use the heaven and earth splitting arrow to block the passage between the two realms?" "That's right." Hong Tailong nodded his head firmly. The heaven and earth splitting arrow isn't an ordinary divine artifact. If it hasn't recognized a master, blocking the passage between the two realms would still be dangerous. But it has already recognized a master. As long as we use it to block the passage between the two realms, no one will be able to move it. Unless you die. Yu Qianzhou pondered for a moment, then slowly said, "For the peace of this human realm, I've spared no expense and put in a lot of effort. Now that things have come to this, how can I let it repeat the mistakes of the past because of my selfishness? Looks like this is the only way." As he spoke, he opened his eyes wide and shouted, "All right. Let's do it. Use the divine arrow to block it." He was actually willing to give up on the heaven and earth splitting arrow. Hong Tailong was instantly filled with deep veneration. This kind of person didn't make him work for nothing. However, he had thought too highly of Yu Qianzhou. Actually, he didn't want to give up on such a divine artifact, but the situation forced him to do so for the time being. In addition, he had always suspected that there was some kind of conspiracy on this divine arrow, so he was in a state of anxiety. Besides, he believed that once he found a way to seal it, he would still be able to retrieve the divine arrow. Yu Qianzhou had already waved his hand, and the surrounding scenery changed continuously. When the scenery stabilized, the two of them had already arrived at the entrance to the Netherworld. When Hong Tailong saw the sea of Netherworld flames in front of him, he immediately turned around to take a look. The huge Netherworld iron steel inscriptions and that huge door made him understand that they had already arrived at the entrance to the Netherworld. He suddenly stared at Yu Qianzhou and cried out in shock, "You have a star bead? Nonsense. I'm the one who executes punishment on behalf of the heavens. What's so strange about having a star bead?" Yu Qianzhou revealed a very disdainful expression. He had only revealed a little bit of his skill to make Hong Tailong follow him wholeheartedly. He had originally wanted to show off a little, but he didn't expect the other party to be so knowledgeable, saving him a lot of effort to explain. He casually took out the heaven and earth splitting arrow and held it in his hand, stroking it regretfully. Then, he resolutely and forcefully pushed open the door to the Netherworld. Sharp eerie winds instantly gushed out like ink. The divine arrow entered the crack of the door, and he shouted, "Expand." The entire divine arrow immediately shone with golden light, and it rapidly grew longer and thicker, expanding the door to the Netherworld. Only when half of the arrow was inside and the other half was outside, did the eerie wind cease. Seeing that Yu Qianzhou had really given up on the heaven and earth splitting arrow, Hong Tailong was incomparably moved. Previously, he suspected that Yu Qianzhou would be reluctant to part with the heaven and earth splitting arrow and had been waiting to see. At this moment, he instantly let go of his pride as a dragon and willingly submitted to Yu Qianzhou. Hong Tailong took a deep breath and said, "I've heard a legend in the Immortal realm. This door to the Netherworld is extraordinary. It's easy to shatter, but it's hard to merge again. If someone can use the true Samadhi fire to completely erase the various forms of life on the door and merge the entire door together seamlessly, separating the yin and yang, then the yin and yang will be severed. The entire door to the Netherworld will disappear, and the Netherworld passage will also disappear completely." "There's such a thing?" Yu Qianqiu was startled. Then, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. He stretched out his palm, and green, black, and purple flames appeared in his palm at the same time. He said, I can control these 3 mystical flames, but my cultivation is too low. I can't merge them into the true Samadhi fire. Otherwise, so what if I completely sever the yin and yang realms? Chapter 1173. Hong Tailong was speechless with his mouth slightly agape. He was wondering how many things this guy had hidden on him. How could he have anything he wanted? Furthermore, each and every one of them was unimaginable. As expected of the executioner of heaven, he was blessed by the heavens. Yu Qianqiu retracted the flames in his palm and closed his mouth. Since you possess 3 types of true fire, you must be proficient in the art of controlling fire. It won't be difficult to fuse them into the Samadhi true fire. Hong Tailong smiled faintly and said, I can use the divine dragon empowerment technique to transfer a portion of my cultivation to you so that you have enough cultivation to fuse with the Samadhi true fire. However, it will take a long time. Without at least half a year of comprehension, it will be difficult to fuse them. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up at first, but he shook his head with a bitter smile and said, half a year? I can do many things in this half a year. Now is not the time. Thank you for your kind intentions, but this is the time where I can use you. Preserving your cultivation is more useful to me. Seeing that he was able to resist the temptation of transferring his cultivation, Hong Tailong fell into deep thought as if he was hesitating about something. After a long time, he slowly said, there is another way. That is to devour the fire spirit, one of the 5 spirits of heaven and earth. Let the fire spirit's innate comprehension of fire fuse with you and you can quickly fuse them into the Samadhi true fire. Fire spirit? Yu Qianqiu mocked himself, let alone devouring the fire spirit, I can even devour the 5 spirits of water, fire, metal, wood, and earth. Hong Tailong was stunned and said, what do you mean? I know all of the 5 elements control arts. What do you mean? Yu Qianqiu said disapprovingly. There was not a trace of pride on his face. What? Hong Tailong was shocked again and was stunned for a long time before he said anxiously, you know all of the 5 elements control arts? How is that possible? How can a person cultivate all of the 5 elements control arts? What happens when the 5 elements clash? Don't you feel uncomfortable? You should have told me this earlier. I have already practiced it. What's the use of saying it now? Besides, I don't feel uncomfortable at all. Yu Qianqiu shrugged. Then, he stretched out his left hand and a water dragon appeared. It swam 1 round and ran back. With a stretch of his right hand, an earth dragon emerged and circled around before returning. Following that, a golden dragon appeared from each of his hands, and he kissed the green wood elemental dragon. After separating, he retracted his hands. His shy and bashful look after having an affair was simply vivid and lifelike. Hong Tailong was instantly dumbfounded. The corners of his mouth twitched incessantly, and he screamed madly in his heart that there was no justice in this world. This guy's body is simply a treasure trove. As expected of the person who executes punishments on behalf of the heavens. However, can a person who executes punishments on behalf of the heavens be so extravagant and unscrupulous? He was simply a person who was blessed by the heavens. If they were in the God realm, they would be envied to death. Hong Tailong no longer had any doubts about Yu Qianqiu's identity as the heavens executioner. He dared to pat his chest and guarantee that if he were to admit the wrong person again, he would dig his eyeballs out and feed them to the dogs. Let's go. We'll go to the dense fog forest and completely destroy the Immortal Ascension stage. Just as Yu Qianqiu was about to wave his hand and teleport away, Hong Tailong held his hand and sighed, I know where the fire spirit is. Yu Qianqiu was startled. His eyes quickly lit up as he asked, where? You've already met him twice. Hong Tailong retracted his hand and sighed. Yu Qianqiu was instantly confused. Hong Tailong had been trapped for so many years, and this was the first time he had come out with him. However, he said that he had already met him twice. Just who could it be? Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind. He recalled the kid who slept on the green lotus with his buttocks naked. He said in astonishment, could it be that kid in the green fire? Apart from that kid, he really couldn't think of anyone else that Hong Tailong knew he had met twice. Furthermore, that kid was actually sleeping in the fire. His background was truly unimaginable. Sigh. This is all fate. Only now do I understand why someone inexplicably gave me 9 precious green lotus fire seeds when I was about to leave the divine dragon mountain. Hee hee. Feelings are all prepared for you. It's all destined and arranged. Hong Tailong looked at Yu Qianqiu and shook his head with a bitter smile. That's right, it's Qing air. Originally, the 9-petaled green lotus could nurture 9 fire spirits. Unfortunately, you stole the green fire at the critical moment of nurturing them. Hence, 8 of them died prematurely. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath. Although that fat kid was crafty, he really couldn't do anything to him after he devoured him. He originally thought it was Hong Tailong's grandson. He didn't expect it to be a fire spirit. After a moment of silence, he shook his head with a bitter smile. Then forget it. I really can't do it. After all, that kid is not an outsider. It's nothing. I won't erase his consciousness. I will extract it and store it. In the future, when I have the chance to return to the divine world, I will find a way to find the green lotus fire seed for him to nurture again. Hong Tailong's smile was a little unnatural. It's just that it will take many years for him to be reborn. It will be hard on him. Yu Qianqiu lowered his head and frowned for a while. Let's talk about this later. Let's go destroy the Immortal Ascension stage first. With a wave of his hand, the two disappeared through the exit of the Netherworld. Meanwhile, the ball of black light that escaped from the entrance of the Netherworld passed through the Netherworld and directly returned to the Immortal World's mystic Immortal City. Demon Lord 3 Knights, who occupied the newly constructed branch of Unrequited Love Palace, was sitting high above. Currently, almost no one in the Netherworld or Immortal World dared to resist the Demon World's army. Wang Qing and his son had also escaped into the Netherworld God Palace. Below, a few great demon kings were discussing how to provoke the Netherworld God Palace. At this moment, a cry of alarm came from outside. Everyone turned to look and saw a ball of black light charging into the main hall and floating in the air. A majestic and ancient aura immediately filled the entire main hall, shocking everyone's soul. The few great demon kings and Eunuch Li, who was standing beside Demon Lord 3 Knights, all knelt down on one knee in shock. They shouted in unison, "Greetings, Lord Demon God." The Demon Dao generals who came to capture the intruder and the Demon Dao general sitting inside the main hall all trembled. Jin Tai was among them, while Bai Qi had gone to the Netherworld. Everyone didn't expect this ball of black light to be the arrival of the legendary demon god. They immediately knelt down and shouted in worship. Demon Lord 3 Knights, on the other hand, had never come into contact with a demon god before. When he saw everyone's actions, he sucked in a cold breath. Just as he got up and was about to kneel down, he heard Yan Zhuixing's urgent voice. "Demon Lord, save me." Everyone was stunned and looked up. A red light flashed in Demon Lord 3 Knights' eyes. When he saw Yan Zhuixing's nascent soul, he immediately stopped kneeling and said in shock, "Yan Zhuixing, how did you become like this? Where's your corporeal body?" The others also stood up in shock, feeling like they had knelt for nothing. Yan Zhuixing, who was in the black light, immediately recounted the tragic experience of him, Li Tian, and the other 3 great demon kings barging into the human world. In the end, he emphasized with grief and indignation, "If it wasn't for Lord Demon God breaking through the void and rushing over from the divine world to save me, I would have been like great demon king Li Tian and the others, turning into ashes. Demon Lord, please find me a suitable corporeal body." Everyone sucked in a cold breath. They didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to be so powerful. He actually hid such a terrifying killing move and instantly killed everyone. What was even more shocking was that in order to save Yan Zhuixing, Lord Demon God had instantly broken through the void from the divine world and descended into the human world. just how powerful was his cultivation? It was simply unimaginable. Many people's gazes were filled with extreme reverence. There was even reverence in them. They couldn't wait to see Lord Demon God's glory with their own eyes. Demon Lord Three Knights clenched his fists tightly. He was actually trembling in excitement because of Demon God's divine ability. He was also honored by the glory of his ancestors. In the past, there were actually many people who doubted whether Yan Juexing was Lord Demon God's personal disciple. They were very suspicious about him becoming the Vice Palace Master of Demon Palace and felt that it was impossible. Why would Lord Demon God choose a personal disciple from the divine world to the human world? However, everything that happened in front of them made everyone dispel their suspicions. They were extremely respectful to Yan Juexing and didn't dare to underestimate him in the slightest. Demon Lord Three Knights felt that it was a great pity that he couldn't see his ancestors' shocking glory with his own eyes. That was the god he had heard everyone around him praise since he was young. It was the source of his pride. Lord Demon God's glorious achievements had already been engraved in his bones. He had always wanted to repeat that proud legend. He calmed his excited emotions and slowly let out a breath. He tilted his head slightly to look at Eunuch Lee beside him. Eunuch Lee nodded in understanding. His gaze quickly swept across the crowd and finally landed on a guard at the door. He discovered that his cultivation and physical body matched Yan Juexing's nascent soul. Suddenly, he grabbed at the air, and a gust of wind blew in the hall. That person was sucked over without any ability to resist. After being grabbed by the shoulder by Eunuch Lee, he immediately understood that he was about to be possessed. He immediately cried out, "Demon Lord, spare me! Demon Lord!" Before he finished speaking, Eunuch Lee had already slapped his head. Several white halos of light repeatedly expelled the dark red blood mist from his body. Suddenly, the white halos of light quickly retracted. Eunuch Lee pinched open the guard's mouth and twisted it towards the black light that was enveloping Yan Juexing's nascent soul in the air. With a whoosh, the black light directly entered the person's mouth. That person's abdomen swelled and squirmed, and then there was no more movement. Eunuch Lee casually picked up that person by the waist. Without saying anything to anyone, he turned around and went to the back hall. After everyone present witnessed this scene, they all kept quiet out of fear, not daring to say anything. Demon Lord Three Knights' gaze swept across the hall and landed on Jean Tai's somewhat strange expression. He shook off his scarlet cloak and sat down. He coldly asked, "Jean Tai, what's going on in that human realm? I heard that you and Bai Qi joined hands to fight a person called the Demon Lord of 10,000 Swords. You even suffered a great loss. I believe you know the situation there better than us." Jean Tai hurriedly walked to the center and bowed. "Demon Lord, what's going on in that human realm?" Back then, that Demon Lord of 10,000 Swords appeared strangely. This subordinate even suspected that he was someone from the demon realm. From what Vice Palace Lord said, it was likely that the Demon Lord of 10,000 Swords' heaven and earth splitting arrow that heavily injured them. I didn't expect that it had already fallen into Yu Qianshou's hands. However, the heaven and earth splitting arrow back then didn't seem to have such great power. This subordinate is also a little confused. Chapter 1174. Yu Qianshou and Hong Tailong's figures suddenly appeared outside the dense fog forest where the colorful fog lingered. The two of them looked around and didn't find any movement. Their gazes landed on the gorgeous fog with different expressions. In reality, it was very unlikely that anyone would come here. Although the colorful fog was mesmerizing, there was no need for ordinary people to set foot in this barren land. Hong Tailong suddenly turned around and looked at Yu Qianshou, sighing, "Star bead is really magical. It can actually go wherever you want to go. No matter how far the distance is, it's all in the blink of an eye. It's not as magical as you think. You have to set the coordinates beforehand." Yu Qianshou paused for a moment. He turned around and asked curiously, "How much do you know about star bead?" He originally thought that the other party understood star bead very well. In the end, the other party's words made him suspicious. "I'm not too sure." I've only heard rumors that it's a divine artifact refined by Tao. Every bead might have different functions, but those who can use star bead are people who can inherit Tao. Hong Tailong looked at Yu Qianzhou with a complicated gaze. There was also some envy in it. Yu Qianzhou smiled disapprovingly. He didn't even know who Tao was, let alone inheriting Tao. Just the star bead that he knew had already changed owners 3 times. First, it landed in by Changchun's hands. Then, it landed in by Suzhen's hands. Finally, he picked it up. It had nothing to do with inheriting Tao. However, he only kept these words in his heart. He wouldn't tell Hong Tailong. However, he was still rather interested in that mysterious Tao. He asked, "Who exactly is that Tao? I've heard people mentioning it several times, but they didn't mention it in detail. Can you tell me about it?" Hong Tailong shook his head and said, "I've only heard of it. I've never seen it. It seems that only a few people have seen it. However, my dragon race and phoenix race have always obeyed him. Damn it. Seems like experts like to play mysterious." Yu Qianzhou curled his lips in disdain and looked at the dense fog forest again. "What do we do now?" Hong Tailong looked at the 7-colored fog with a perplexed expression. Then, he said decisively, "Go in. First, I'll destroy the Immortal Ascension stage and naturally cut off the connection between the immortal world and the human world. Then, I'll take the soul-forming smoke." "All right." Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and the 2 of them disappeared. In the blink of an eye, they reappeared in the golden square. The moment Hong Tailong landed on the ground, he scanned his surroundings. Then, a red light erupted from his body and soared into the sky. His astonishing aura forced Yu Qianzhou to quickly move far away to observe. Roar. A resounding and vigorous dragon roar resounded throughout the world, shaking the entire basin and the Golden Plaza. The rainbow-colored clouds in the surroundings began to surge. After the red light that pierced through the heavens and the earth vanished, a 200-zhang-long red dragon stretched out its claws. Its imposing aura was unstoppable. After its body, which was covered in red scales, curled up and swam back, the arrogant dragon show's remorse suddenly raised a gust of wind and plunged down. Boom! The altar in the center of the Golden Plaza was smashed deep into the ground. Then, the huge red dragon rapidly circled around the huge basin. The huge dragon's fangs opened its mouth and sucked in crazily. All the gold bricks, gold nuggets, gold pillars, and other gold objects on the Golden Plaza were sucked into its stomach in just a short while. The entire dazzling Golden Plaza immediately became a scene of devastation. Then, the huge red dragon shook its head and tail at lightning speed, crazily crashing into the surrounding mountains and basins. Rumble. Amidst the rumbling sounds, Yu Qianzhou sucked in a breath of cold air and quickly dodged to the sky to observe the situation. He saw that the huge basin below had completely collapsed in just a moment's time. Everything had been razed to the ground. The rainbow-colored fog that had gathered in the surroundings had also lost its restraints and started to disperse with the wind. Aoo! The dragon roared once again. The huge red dragon soared into the sky and looked down at the vast land. Looking at the huge dragon beside him with its 4 claws wide open and its long body wriggling with the sound of wind and thunder, Yu Qianzhou was so excited that he actually dodged and stood on the huge dragon's ferocious head. He stood between the 2 antlers with his hands clasped behind his back. A feeling of arrogance welled up in him. The huge dragon's red eyes turned to look at him. It did not show any displeasure. Instead, it said in a deep rumbling voice, "You have the star bead. Are you afraid of the soul-transforming smoke?" "No." Yu Qianzhou shook his head forcefully. "Then stand still. I'm going to take this soul-transforming smoke. I can't let it wreak havoc on the world." Aoo! The dragon roared angrily in the sky. The huge red scales on its body slightly opened up. Its aura surged up and down its body. Suddenly, the wind and clouds surged. The huge dragon opened its fangs and swooped down. The vast land was suddenly swept up by a gust of wind. A strong suction force carried the rainbow-colored fog into the huge dragon's mouth like a rainbow. The huge dragon soared into the sky and danced around, chasing after the scattered rainbow-colored fog. After sweeping away all the rainbow-colored fog, the huge dragon shook its head and waved its tail as it soared into the sky. After circling around its surroundings once, AO. Another resounding dragon roar shook the heavens and the earth. Without any hesitation, it directly rode the wind and climbed the clouds, flying across the sky towards the horizon. Dragon's roar of the 9 heavens changes. Hong Tai Long might have been trapped underground for a long time. It had been a long time since he indulged himself in the sky. From time to time, he would let out a deafening roar to vent his emotions. Yu Qianqiu expressed his understanding. He did not stop Hong Tai Long and allowed him to soar into the sky. Meanwhile, he was also enjoying the legendary feeling of riding a dragon. No matter how fierce the wind blew against him, his green robe fluttered in the sky. He felt that his life was not in vain. However, it was, after all, a huge fellow flying in the sky. Coupled with Hong Tai Long's deafening roars from time to time, it was hard for the mortals on the ground not to notice it. However, no one could see the tiny Yu Qianqiu standing on the dragon's head. Look, what's that in the sky? Divine dragon. It's a divine dragon. It's a divine dragon. Everyone, look, it's a divine dragon. Passing through the borders of Huaxia, the mortals on the ground raised their heads and pointed at the sky. Everyone who could walk rushed out of their houses or onto the streets, pointing at the sky. Hong Tai Long seemed to enjoy the feeling of being the center of attention and admiration again. It was as if he had found the supreme glory that belonged to the dragon race. He intentionally slowed down his flying speed and roared even more frequently, as if he was afraid that others could not see him. When he saw a city with many people, he would even fly a few rounds in the sky to show off, flying towards the most crowded places. Yu Qianqiu did not know whether to laugh or cry. This Hong Tai Long was old, but he was still a flirtatious dragon. If he had known earlier, he would have dragged some people to see the scene of him being imprisoned. In the sky above Huaxia's capital city, a few dragon roars shook the entire city. In the blink of an eye, the streets were filled with people, pointing at the dragon flying in the sky. Endless sounds of astonishment and commotion rose and fell. In the palace, Shi Wenguang and the officials were discussing matters when they suddenly heard the shocking dragon roar. Another guard ran over to report that there was a dragon flying in the sky. Shi Wenguang and the officials immediately ran out to watch the commotion. The imperial concubines of the imperial concubines also stood outside and looked up at the sky. In the imperial preceptor Yongzhen's residence, a stream of light shot into the sky. Shi Xiaotian stood tall in the sky, looking at the dragon flying in circles in front of him. Other than shock, he was also on high alert. He vaguely realized that there was someone standing on the dragon's head. When Hong Tai Long's vanity was satisfied and he left, Shi Xiaotian suddenly realized that the person riding on the dragon was actually Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu, who was standing with his hands behind his back, also noticed him. He nodded at him and smiled. The dragon instantly flew past the petrified Shi Xiaotian. Shi Xiaotian was startled awake by the strong wind and immediately shouted, "Boss!" He quickly chased after him. Yu Qianqiu turned to look at him and waved his hand with a warm smile, indicating for him to go back. He then turned back and scolded softly, "Hong Tai Long. Have you had enough of being coquettish? If someone familiar sees you, they would think that I like to show off. I've only come out for a breath of fresh air after over 100,000 years. I've lost my composure. Please forgive me." Hong Tai Long chuckled. With a shake of his body, he quickly adjusted his direction and increased his speed, flying straight for the demon region. How could Shi Xiaotian catch up to Hong Tai Long's flying speed? Seeing Yu Qianqiu riding the dragon into the horizon, he couldn't catch up no matter how hard he tried. A feeling of helplessness welled up in his heart as he stopped in the sky. His face was filled with desolation. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that Boss would be able to ride a dragon and fly in the sky. Every time he saw Boss, Boss would give him a surprise that made him envious. Boss's level was getting higher and higher, and he was falling further and further behind. To be honest, the life that Yu Qianqiu had displayed was the cultivation life that Shi Xiaotian had yearned for a long time. Only by cultivating like this could one not cultivate in vain. He had always desired this, but it was a pity that Boss did not bring him along, leaving him with endless melancholy and grief. However, Shi Xiaotian was inexperienced, so how could he know the dangers behind this glory? Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu had purposely pulled Shi Xiaotian out of danger because of their friendship. Humans were always like this. What they could not obtain was what they desired the most. They would often neglect the beauty around them. Not long after the depressed Shi Xiaotian returned to the imperial preceptor Yongzhen's residence, his father, Shi Wenguang, hurriedly rushed over. He pulled Shi Xiaotian aside and asked anxiously, "Was that a divine dragon flying in the sky just now? Was it a divine dragon? Did I see wrongly?" The shock on his face had yet to fade. He had purposely come over to seek confirmation. Shi Xiaotian sighed and slowly sat on the spacious armchair. With a desolate smile, he said, "Yes. The one riding the divine dragon was Ol. Mr. Yu." "Ah. It's Mr. Yu?" Shi Wenguang exclaimed. His face was filled with envy as he shook his head and sighed. After a long time, he said, "Riding the divine dragon to fly in the sky. Mr. Yu is really a godly person. Why didn't you invite him over?" Wanting to see Yu Qianqiu was a pretense. In fact, he did not like to see Yu Qianqiu at all. This was because he was used to being an emperor and was used to being high and mighty. He was a little conflicted about bowing to others. In fact, he really wanted to see the legendary divine dragon up close. Mr. Yu Qianqiu has other matters to attend to, so it's inconvenient for him to come. Shi Xiaotian squeezed out a smile and said, "Father, you should go back to handle the affairs of the country. I'm going to cultivate in seclusion." Shi Wenguang sighed and left, leaving Shi Xiaotian paralyzed on the armchair. In his mind, he recalled the awe-inspiring scene of his boss riding the divine dragon. It was a pity that he could not share in the glory. Little did he know that after they parted, the two of them never met again. The scene of Yu Qianqiu riding the divine dragon and turning back to wave at him with a smile became the most unforgettable scene in Shi Xiaotian's long life. He searched for it in the future but could never think of it. He could only reminisce about it. Chapter 1175. The sky was high and the clouds were vast. Not a single trace of green could be seen in the demonic ghost region. It was no longer the demonic ghost region that was covered in dark clouds and overgrown with demonic ghosts. In the vast wilderness, Yu Qianqiu walked around with his hands behind his back. Under his feet was an underground space that spewed out green flames. Below him was a surging lava river. Yu Qianqiu sent Hong Tailong down, but he didn't dare to face the naked fat kid who was looking at him curiously. He quickly escaped outside, not wanting to hear or see the conversation between Hong Tailong and the kid. Yu Qianqiu walked to a cliff with his hands behind his back and looked around. He was unable to connect the desolate scene before him with the famous demonic ghost region of the past. He silently pondered for a long time. Suddenly, the ground shook, followed by the sound of something breaking through the ground. Yu Qianqiu pursed his lips, but he didn't turn around. Green flames gushed out from the hole on the ground as Hong Tailong slowly rose up with the bare buttocks child in tow. The child looked left and right, curiously looking at this desolate world. This was the first time he had seen the true appearance of this world. A small bird that flew across the sky had aroused his great interest, causing his gaze to chase after it with an unrelenting desire to part with it. Yu Qianqiu. Hong Tailong's voice was heavy as he walked behind Hong Tailong with the kid. Yu Qianqiu slowly turned around and saw the kid cowering behind Hong Tailong in fear, as if he already knew his fate. Yu Qianqiu wanted to squeeze out a harmless smile, but it looked worse than crying. He coughed and smiled bitterly at Hong Tailong. "Forget it." Hong Tailong pulled the kid out from behind, squatted down and looked at the kid. "What's wrong? Didn't we agree on this?" The kid looked at Yu Qianzhou with fear and replied weakly, "Grandpa. I'm scared." Hong Tailong buried his head, then raised it and smiled, Didn't Grandpa tell you? The immortal realm doesn't allow people from the lower realm to step into it. This is the only way I can bring you back to the immortal realm. Furthermore, you shouldn't exist in the mortal realm." Hong Tailong, forget it. Yu Qianzhou cupped his fists and bowed. Unexpectedly, the child bit his finger and said to Yu Qianzhou with a bit of shyness, "Can I go see the world first?" Then, he lowered his head and said in an aggrieved tone, "I still don't know what the human world is like. I'm afraid that when I reach the God realm." Hong Tailong frowned, but Yu Qianzhou hurriedly said, Sure. Hong Tailong, bring him around to take a look. I beg you." He could only beg Hong Tailong. He did not dare to accompany this child to look around. Hong Tailong carried the child and turned into a beam of light, disappearing into the distance. Yu Qianzhou touched his forehead in a dilemma. He walked to the place where the blue fire was spewing out and jumped down. He used the metal art and earth art to seal the fire hole. Then, he flew back up and used the earth art to completely bury the space below. Then, he sat down cross-legged on the ground. 3 days later, Hong Tailong carried the child back. The child had already put on his clothes and was holding a candied haw in each of his hands. However, his eyes had lost their usual liveliness. He was just a gluttonous child who felt that the candied haw was delicious and was munching on it numbly. Yu Qianzhou looked at the child and sensed something. Hong Tailong placed the child in front of him. The child looked at Yu Qianzhou blankly as if he did not recognize him. Hong Tailong took away the candied haw in the child's hands, sealed it in a crystal ball, and swallowed it. When the child saw that there was nothing left to eat, he immediately hugged Hong Tailong's thigh and wailed. Glistening tears immediately appeared in Hong Tailong's eyes. He raised his head to the sky and howled. After which, his hand moved like lightning, slapping the child's head. The clothes on the child's body instantly turned into ashes, while the child's body condensed into a red ball of light in his palm. Hong Tailong sent the red ball of light to the mouth of Yu Qianzhou, who was sitting cross-legged. Yu Qianzhou's dry lips swallowed and slowly opened his mouth. Hong Tailong slapped the red ball of light into his mouth, then turned towards the sky and choked with tears. Yu Qianzhou immediately felt a boiling sensation in his abdomen. He suppressed his agitated emotions and forced the red ball of light in his abdomen into his dantian. Suddenly, a golden light burst out from Yu Qianzhou's dantian and shone on the red ball of light. In an instant, the red ball of light turned back into the child. The child cheered and flew toward the red crystal bead. He swallowed the red crystal bead into his stomach. In an instant, red light burst out from his body. Yu Qianzhou suddenly felt a connection with the child. The child's expression instantly turned solemn. He sat cross-legged on the spot where the red crystal ball originally was and began to revolve around the nascent soul in his dantian along with the other 4 crystal balls. Yu Qianzhou immediately felt that his cultivation had increased a little. However, the increase was not huge. When he thought about how he could accept the cultivation of the 5 spirits after devouring them, he reckoned that the child's cultivation had fused with his own. The child's innate understanding of fire surged into his mind like a tidal wave. He then began to quietly sort it out. At night, Hong Tailong gazed at the endless starry sky with his hands behind his back. Suddenly, a light flashed behind him. He slowly turned his head and saw a ball of blue fire on Yu Qianzhou's left shoulder, a ball of black fire on his right shoulder, and a ball of purple fire on top of his head. The situation was extremely strange. Not long after, the blue and black fire on his left and right shoulders slowly floated to the top of his head and pressed towards the purple fire in the middle. After the 3 flames collided with each other, they violently fluctuated as if they were repelling each other. Yu Qianzhou, who was sitting cross-legged, had a grave expression on his face. After about 2 hours, the 3 violently fluctuating flames finally calmed down and started to merge together bit by bit. When the 3 flames had completely merged together, Yu Qianzhou's eyes suddenly opened. 2 rainbow-colored rays of light shot out from his eyes. The overlapping three-colored flames above his head rumbled like thunder and completely merged together in an instant. The gorgeous three-colored flames turned into 7 colors. Instantly, the flames rose to a height of 100 meters. A rainbow-colored fire dragon burned incessantly above Yu Qianzhou's head. The terrifyingly high temperature immediately caused the ground to crack with crackling sounds. Countless cracks rapidly extended in all directions. Hong Tailong's pupils shrank. Even though he was a fire elemental fire dragon, he still found it hard to endure. Suddenly, he felt a terrifyingly high temperature surrounding his body. Clearly, Yu Qianzhou had noticed it. True Samadhi fire. Hong Tailong exclaimed. The remaining sadness on his face was instantly swept away. He clapped his hands and shouted, "You succeeded." The rainbow-colored rays of light that burst out from Yu Qianzhou's eyes quickly retracted, forming 2 balls of rainbow-colored flames in his eyes. Yu Qianzhou slowly stood up and spread his arms to embrace the heavens and earth. His entire body instantly ignited with rainbow-colored flames, combining with the fire dragon above his head. They soared into the sky, reaching a height of 1,000 meters. The world flickered with rainbow-colored light, illuminating the desolate demon domain. It was as if the demon domain had obtained a new life. Yu Qianzhou slowly looked at Hong Tailong and said indifferently, "So, this is the true Samadhi fire. So it is rainbow-colored. I can feel its terrifying destructive might. It even gives me the urge to fight the demon lord 3 nights head-on." Hong Tailong turned a deaf ear to Xiao Chen's words. He raised his head and looked at the rainbow-colored flames that soared 1,000 meters in shock. He cried out involuntarily, "Why is there so much true Samadhi fire?" Lowering his head, he looked at Yu Qianzhou and said, "How many blue flames, black flames, and purple flames are hidden in your body? You actually managed to fuse so many true Samadhi fire? This is only a portion. The true Samadhi fire in my body is enough to turn the area within 1,000 meters into a sea of true Samadhi fire. Furthermore, after fusing the 3 flames, it is equivalent to having 2 empty spots in my body. I can also collect the 3 flames at any time and fuse them at any time. My body can store more than twice the amount of true Samadhi fire. A mere 1,000-meter-long fire dragon is nothing," Yu Qianzhou said indifferently. Hong Tailong shook his head in disbelief. He had seen the true Samadhi fire by chance in the Immortal realm. However, he had only collected 3 types of flames and fused them, then stored them in special treasures for future use. He had never heard of anyone being able to store the true Samadhi fire in their own body. Furthermore, it was such a large-scale storage and could be refined and stored at any time. This is simply unbelievable. If the artifact refinement experts of the Immortal realm were to find out about this, they would definitely capture you and use you as a refinement fire cauldron. You must know that the best fire seed for refining divine equipment is this true Samadhi fire that can refine anything, Hong Tailong exclaimed. Yu Qianzhou gently clasped his palms together, and the soaring true Samadhi fire immediately retreated back into his body. The rainbow-colored flames leaping in his eyes also disappeared at the same time. Only then did Hong Tailong dare to approach him. He patted his shoulder and laughed, "With so much true Samadhi fire, you and I now have the capital to make a trip to the Immortal realm and the Netherworld. We'll slaughter those bastards until they wail like ghosts and howl like wolves. We'll let them know that I, Hong Tailong, have returned, haha." Yu Qianzhou shook his head and sighed, "By right, I should be happy. However, I can't feel happy at all. This is all thanks to Qing. Speaking of that naked child, Hong Tailong's expression instantly dimmed. He smiled faintly and said, "I wonder when I can return to the Immortal realm. Even if I do return to the Immortal realm, I'm afraid it'll be several tens of thousands of years before I can see Qing again." Yu Qianzhou took a deep breath. He pulled himself together and said, "All right. Let's not talk about such a depressing matter. Let's go to the gate of the Netherworld to retrieve the heaven and earth splitting arrow. Then, we'll use the true Samadhi fire to completely seal the passageway to the Netherworld. After that, we'll join hands and go to the Immortal realm and the Netherworld to deal with them. It'll be best if we can capture Kintai." I'll devour him as well. At that time, my cultivation will skyrocket. I want to see how the devil path will unify the three realms. The two of them disappeared from where they were at the same time. In the blink of an eye, they appeared in front of the gate of the netherworld. Looking at the gigantic divine arrow embedded in the gate of the netherworld, Yu Qianqiu made a grabbing motion with his 5 fingers and said sternly, "Come back." The divine arrow immediately shone with a golden light and shrunk rapidly. The gate of the netherworld closed quickly as well. A chilly wind that was as sharp as ink whistled out. After the gate of the netherworld was completely closed, there were still a few large holes in the middle of the gate. They were the large holes made by the sharp hexagonal blade of the divine arrow. The chilly wind that was as sharp as ink continued to pour out from the holes. Chapter 1176. Yu Qianqiu's long green robe fluttered in the fierce chilly wind, but he was indifferent to it. His eyes fell on the reliefs on the dark gate. The faces of the old man, the child, the man, and the woman were all different. Their expressions were vivid and lifelike, as if they were telling him something. Wang. A rainbow-colored light blossomed in this underground world filled with cold wind. The true samadhi fire enveloped Yu Qianqiu's entire body. The wind didn't scatter it, as if it was solid. Yu Qianqiu's expression was solemn. He didn't know if he could completely seal the underworld passage by doing this, nor did he know if it was right, but he knew that this ghost gate was connected to the human world. It was too unfair to the living beings in the human world. If the ghost cultivator inside was unhappy, the living beings in the human world would suffer. No matter if it's right or wrong, since the affairs of the world are unpredictable, then let me be the one to administer punishment on behalf of the heaven. Whether it's right or wrong, I will bear the responsibility alone. A loud voice that sounded like he had become a Buddha suddenly resounded in the underground space. Perhaps it was because he had become a demon, but the skeleton sculptures on the walls of the netherworld Iron Mountain immediately reverberated with the same voice. The voice was like the sound of endless Sanskrit. Hong Tailong's heart suddenly surged with an indescribable solemn feeling. His gaze swept across the surroundings, but he didn't know how this voice was formed. Yu Qianqiu had already struck out with his palm. The true samadhi fire on his body shot out from his arm, forcing back the cold wind that was blowing out. The rainbow-colored wall of fire covered the entire ghost gate of the netherworld. The expressions of the human skulls on the black door gradually changed. Then, it slowly melted and disappeared, fusing with the entire door. It was as if all living beings had cut off their extravagant desires towards this world. All greed, anger, and delusion were separated into yin and yang. Dust to dust, dust to dust. The two worlds of yin and yang would never be connected again. The few cracks on the dark door were also gradually melted by the melted black molten iron. The gap between the door and the door frame was also completely closed. Yu Qianqiu withdrew the true samadhi fire back into his body with a serious expression. The mournful, sinister winds completely died down, and the echoes of the Buddhist chants also disappeared. After the two of them looked around, Yu Qianqiu turned around and spread his hands at Hong Tailong. Didn't you say that after the samadhi true fire sealed the underworld gate, the underworld passage would completely disappear? How come I don't feel anything? Could it be that it completely disappeared just like that? I've only heard of this legend. How would I know if it's true or not? Hong Tailong smiled bitterly. Before he could finish his sentence, he realized that there was something wrong with Yu Qianqiu's gaze as he looked behind him. He quickly turned around and saw that the blazing ghost flames were gradually dying down. The blazing flames from earlier were slowly being suppressed, and the intensity of the flames gradually weakened to the point where there was nothing left. The red molten lava kept on seething. Suddenly, as if a hole had opened up in the ground, all the fiery red molten lava instantly gushed into the depths of the ground. The entire underground space became pitch black, and even with their cultivations, they could not see each other. It was as if they had entered some kind of black hole. Yu Qianqiu immediately became vigilant, afraid that there might be some danger. He immediately wanted to release his divine sense to bring Hong Tailong away, but he realized that he could not release his divine sense outside his body. What made him even more horrified was that his connection with Utopia had been completely severed. He could not leave even if he wanted to. Hong Tai Long. Yu Qianqiu opened his mouth and shouted, but he realized that he could not make any sound. He wanted to move his limbs, but he realized that it was just wishful thinking. It was as if his soul had completely lost connection with his physical body, and only his thoughts and consciousness still existed. Damn! How did this happen? Could it be that I've really done something wrong? Is this a punishment for me? Yu Qianqiu shouted silently into the endless darkness. A deep sense of fear rose from the bottom of his heart, but it was mostly filled with indignation and grief. He hysterically wanted to tear apart this endless darkness, but he was powerless to do so. Suddenly, spots of light flashed in front of his eyes, and he saw Hong Tai Long, who was just inches away from him. The horrified Hong Tai Long also saw him, and the two of them were stunned at the same time. They subconsciously raised their hands, only to discover that they could move. However, their abilities had not returned. The two of them wanted to get closer, but they realized that no matter how fast they walked, they could not get close to each other. This short distance seemed to have become the end of the world. The two of them desperately ran toward each other. However, the two of them fell to the ground in exhaustion, unable to take another step forward. The endless feeling of strangeness almost caused the two of them to break down. They could see each other shouting loudly for them, but not only could they not hear it, neither could the other party. The two of them, who were sitting paralyzed on the ground, seemed to be floating in the endless void. They looked around helplessly, and the nethermetal wall that was embossed with countless skulls suddenly became clear. Spots of light constantly floated out from the two empty eye sockets of the skulls. When the entire space was filled with countless spots of light, the skull wall quietly disappeared into the void. The drifting spots of light gradually moved rhythmically, but it also seemed to be without any pattern. Gradually, it formed a scene that looked like a vast starry sky. The two of them suddenly realized that they were sitting paralyzed in the endless starry sky, and they were even more shocked. The vast starry sky was weaving an ancient existence. Suddenly, all the stars trembled, and like a meteor shower, they flew toward a certain direction, some even passing through the bodies of the two of them. The two of them looked in that direction, and they saw the door to the netherworld. All the meteor shower easily passed through the wall without any resistance, and the door to the netherworld was not damaged at all. The scene was exceptionally magnificent, and an indescribable feeling of great vicissitude surged into the hearts of the two of them. When the last spot of light flew through the door, the entire door to the netherworld suddenly distorted, turning into a ball of black light. The black light was so deep that it seemed like it could devour everything. The more it spun, the bigger it became. Suddenly, it condensed into a point and disappeared. The two of them immediately felt the world tremble, as if they had woken up from a nightmare. The two of them stood together, looking at each other. The bright and beautiful sunlight shone down from the sky, shining on the two of them. The two of them raised their heads to look at the sky in astonishment, and discovered that they had unknowingly stood in a vast and deep pit. The sun was at noon. Looking around, the door to the netherworld had disappeared, and the netherworld iron walls that were carved with countless skulls had also disappeared. The netherworld ghost flames, the surging magma, and even the netherworld hole formed by the netherworld iron had disappeared. It was as if the two of them had been transferred to a strange pit in an instant. A small insect that came out of nowhere fluttered its wings and flew between the two of them. The two of them stared at it without blinking. Perhaps the small insect was attracted by the bright colors, as it first flew towards Hong Tai Long, who was dressed in red, and danced between his eyes. Hong Tai Long's eyes that were staring at it immediately turned into a cross-eyed look. The small insect circled around for a while, before losing interest in Hong Tai Long. It seemed to be more interested in Yu Qianqiu, and directly landed on Yu Qianqiu's face. Yu Qianqiu's eyes turned, and he subconsciously gave a slap. It was a clear and resounding slap, causing his own face to feel pain. Hong Tai Long stared at him in astonishment, while Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched. He raised his hand to take a look, and saw that the small insect had been slapped into pieces. The two of them looked at each other again, and Hong Tai Long weakly shouted, "You Qianqiu?" Yu Qianqiu was startled, and immediately shouted, "Hong Tai Long?" The two of them heard each other shout, and looked at where they were standing. They were still in the same position as before the anomaly happened. They were not paralyzed on the ground at all. They moved their hands and feet, and took a few steps forward. When the two of them got closer, they were touching and pinching each other like fools. Suddenly, Yu Qianqiu gave Hong Tai Long a fierce slap on the face. Hong Tai Long covered his face and roared angrily, "What are you doing?" Yu Qianqiu picked his ears amidst the deafening roar, and heaved a sigh of relief. "Damn it! He's really alive. That scared this old man to death. Where is this place?" He flew out as if nothing had happened. Not only was Hong Tai Long not angry, he was also pleasantly surprised when he came back to his senses, and flew out with him. The two of them stood at the edge of the huge crater, and looked around. Hong Tai Long was not too familiar with this place, but Yu Qianqiu could recognize it. They were still within the desolate demonic ghost region, and the original territory of Ill Wind Valley had been completely dug away. He had no idea where it had been dug to. "Where is this?" Hong Tai Long asked, not daring to be sure. "We're still in the mortal realm where we're doing good deeds." "You're right, the passageway to the netherworld has completely disappeared." Yu Qianqiu raised his head to look at the sun, and realized that the time had already changed from midnight to noon. However, the process that the two of them had experienced would definitely not exceed 4 hours, and it was a very strange experience. Sigh. "It's good that you're fine. I was almost scared to death. I've never encountered such a strange thing before." Hong Tai Long laughed, and patted his chest in relief. After relaxing, he looked at Yu Qianqiu and asked, "What should we do next? Go to the immortal realm and the netherworld?" Yu Qianqiu nodded his head heavily, looked around, and let out a long sigh, and said, "The matters in this mortal realm are more or less settled. It's time to solve the problems in other places. Let's go." With a wave of his hand, the two of them disappeared at the same time. In the Divine Ruin Realm base, Hong Tai Long strolled around with his hands clasped behind his back. When everyone found out that he was the divine dragon that the Myriad Swords demon monarch rode back then, they looked at him with incomparable shock, especially Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng. When the two of them felt the powerful dragon aura on his body, they actually faintly felt uneasy and restless. However, when Hong Tai Long saw the pheasant standing on Wu Lishua's shoulder, he couldn't help but cry out in surprise, "Phoenix! So it's a dragon. Who are you? Why are you so noisy? I don't know you." The pheasant opened its eyes and choked him, then continued to stand on Wu Lishua's shoulder and closed its eyes to rest. Hong Tai Long was speechless. Originally, he felt that he was quite high and mighty, but he didn't expect that there would even be a phoenix of the same level as him here. His sense of superiority was immediately dampened, and he immediately became more well-behaved, no longer showing off that he was a divine dragon. After Yu Qianqiu gathered the various leaders to inquire about the recent progress, he dragged Hong Tai Long to the Great Snowy Mountain in the netherworld. Chapter 1177. In the Great Snow Mountain of the underworld, deep in the snowy plains, there was an ice cliff glowing with icy blue light that had existed for countless years. Silver armor soldier, purple armor soldier, blue armor soldier, and red armor soldier paced back and forth in front of the ice palace's gate, as if guarding the gate. The ice souls inside the ice sculptures shone with brilliant colors. They looked helpless and melancholy, thinking about something. Thousand armor soldier. Demon King 3 Knight has led the army of Demon Dao back to the Three Realms. What do you think? Red armor soldier suddenly turned around and asked Silver armor soldier. Purple armor soldier and blue armor soldier turned around at the same time. He's already come out, what can I think? Silver armor soldier stopped in front of a carp ice sculpture, his gaze focused on the eyes of the ice sculpture. There were 2 black ice souls there. Red armor soldier slapped an ice pillar in the pavilion next to him and sighed. We took such a great risk to seal Demon King 3 Knight and the others back then. What a great price we paid. But now the Underworld Emperor has released them, and we've become the dogs of Demon Dao again. Back then, we risked our lives to seal the demon realm for the peace of the three realms. But now... Soldier. You're thinking too much. Silver Armor Soldier looked at him coldly and said in a low voice, the Underworld Emperor has his reasons for doing this. The other three were silent. Within the Ice Palace, Xue Linglong, who was wrapped in a furry fur coat, fell asleep peacefully again. However, her face still had a sickly flush. The Snow Emperor and Snow Empress both heaved a sigh of relief. They cupped their hands towards Bai Qi, who walked down from the ice bed, and said, "Thank you, Emperor of the Underworld. We only talk about friendship, not thanks." Bai Qi smiled elegantly as he stepped on the ice barefoot. "This is why I didn't expose our relationship even in the most difficult times. If I really want to thank you, my four brothers should be the one thanking you for taking care of them. Underworld Emperor, you're too kind." The Snow Empress shook her head and smiled bitterly. The true Samadhi fire in Linglong's body is getting harder and harder to suppress. If the Emperor of the Underworld hadn't arrived in time and used his profound cultivation to suppress it, we wouldn't know what to do. The Snow Empress sat quietly beside her daughter. Bai Qi looked at Xue Linglong, who was sleeping peacefully, and nodded with a serious expression. "Seems like it's getting more and more serious each time. Don't worry, if you need anything, just look for me. I'll be there anytime. I'll look for an opportunity to borrow the power of the Devil's Path to find the fire spirit of the five great spirits of heaven and earth. Hopefully, I'll be able to remove the Samadhi true fire from Linglong's body in one fell swoop." The Snow Emperor and Snow Empress looked at each other. They wanted to say something but hesitated. The Snow Emperor could not help but ask, "I heard that the Emperor of the Underworld has released the Demon Lord of Three Knights and the others?" Bai Qi hesitated for a moment. He said, "I understand your worries, but you can rest assured. Demon Monarch Three Knights has already promised me that I will still represent the Underworld and the Demonic Path Army will not harass you. As for the outside world, you and your wife have never cared about worldly affairs. The changes outside have nothing to do with you. The Great Snow Mountain is still your Great Snow Mountain. I'm just afraid that you won't be able to make the decision when the time comes." The Snow Emperor sighed in his heart. However, there was nothing he could do. He smiled awkwardly and said, "Thank you, Emperor of the Underworld." Bai Qi could guess what they were thinking. However, he was also in a difficult position. He still smiled warmly and said, "All right. My four brothers have troubled you for a long time. I'm here to bring them away with me. We'll meet again in the future." The couple hurriedly sent him off. The three of them walked him all the way to the entrance of the Ice Palace. Silver Armor Thousand Soldiers and the other three also came over to express their gratitude to the couple. Both sides had their own matters on their minds. After exchanging some pleasantries, they were about to leave. Bai Qi and the others had just turned around when they all froze on the spot. Even the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress were no exception. Two figures suddenly appeared on the ice cliff. Yu Qianshou and Hong Tailong were startled when they saw Bai Qi and the others. Hong Tailong suddenly laughed wildly and said, "You can wear out iron shoes in fruitless searching, but you'll find what you're looking for without even looking for it." Bai Qi. "I didn't expect to see us here." Hong Tailong. The five of them trembled and exclaimed in unison. Bai Qi was even more shocked as he said, "You're not dead yet?" Although the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress knew Yu Qianshou, they didn't know Hong Tailong. Seeing how shocked Bai Qi and the others were, in addition to Hong Tailong's tone, the couple instantly felt that something was amiss. Hong Tailong laughed loudly and said, "What a joke. What can a mere spirit severing smoke do to me? Bai Qi, you probably didn't expect to see me again even in your dreams. Where is Jean Tyron? Let's settle the score today." Bai Qi suddenly turned around and looked at the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress coldly. "You two betrayed me?" A murderous intent appeared on his face. The couple hurriedly waved their hands and explained, "Emperor of the Underworld, you've misunderstood. Why would we betray you? Then how did they know I was here? Bai Qi shouted sternly. The silver armor 1,000 soldiers and the other 3 also looked at the couple with murderous intent. The Snow Emperor immediately smiled bitterly at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Yu Qianqiu, why didn't you come earlier or later? Why did you come at this time? My husband and I can't even explain ourselves." Yu Qianqiu was here to exchange for the Xian Ming soul refining technique. How could he let anything happen to the couple? He immediately laughed harshly and said, "Bai Qi, it really has nothing to do with them. I know them and came to visit them when I was passing by. I didn't expect to see you here. You heartless bastard. You actually dared to collude with that bastard Yan Zhuixing to kill me. Today, it's time to settle the score." Actually, there was no need to explain. Bai Qi was just angry for a moment. Thinking about the shocked reactions of Hong Tailong and Yu Qianqiu, they obviously didn't expect to see him here. He immediately laughed coldly and said, "With just the 2 of you?" His gaze swept around, as if he was worried that someone else would appear. The silver-armored soldier brandished his halberd, the purple-armored soldier brandished his scythe, the blue-armored soldier brandished his blue bow and arrow, and the red-armored soldier loosened his grip on the red-armored soldier's red chain. The 4 of them immediately stood in a straight line on either side of the battlefield. The Snow Empress and her husband smiled bitterly. It was obvious that the red old man wasn't someone to be trifled with. If the 2 groups fought, the Ice Palace would probably be destroyed. The Snow Empress gave a look to the Snow Empress, and the Snow Empress left hurriedly. It was more important to protect her unconscious daughter. With this, Yu Qianqiu took out the golden heaven and earth splitting arrow and stabbed it into the icy ground in front of him. Everyone's eyes turned cold at the same time. A cold smile gradually appeared on the corner of Bai Qi's mouth, and he said, "The heaven and earth splitting arrow is in your hands. It seems like the Myriad Swords Demon Lord is really dead. You scared me." It would have been fine if Bai Qi didn't mention the Myriad Swords Demon Lord. The moment Bai Qi mentioned the Myriad Swords Demon Lord, Hong Tailong immediately let out a wild roar and charged over. Bai Qi turned into a stream of light and shot into the sky, and Hong Tailong chased after him. The sky rumbled, and a white figure and a red figure entangled with each other. The 2 of them directly engaged in a fierce battle. The heaven and earth splitting arrow on the icy cliff instantly exploded into tens of thousands of divine arrows, and they shot toward the 4 netherworld generals like a torrential rain. Yu Qianqiu was now extremely courageous, and he dared to take the initiative to fight the 4 netherworld generals head-on. As expected, he didn't panic because he had the goods in his hands. Reckless fellow. The Silver Armor Army's cold laughter was still reverberating, but the 4 of them had already teleported and disappeared from their original spots. The attacks of the tens of thousands of divine swords immediately missed. It was unknown when the Silver Armor Army, the Red Armor Army, and the Purple Armor Army had appeared behind Yu Qianqiu, and they surrounded him. All of them had cold smiles on their faces, and the shadow of the halberd filled the sky. The shadow of the death god's scythe swept across Yu Qianqiu's waist, and the shadow of the red chain lashed out. With the cultivation of these 3 people, if Yu Qianqiu was hit by any one of them, he would immediately have to say goodbye to this world. Especially since the Blue Armor Army in the sky had already drawn their soul-slaying bows. If Yu Qianqiu was lucky enough to escape, the soul-slaying bows would immediately teach him a lesson. Asterisk boom asterisk the tens of thousands of divine swords all shot into the enormous icy mountain. The icy mountain shook, and countless cracks appeared on it. The Snow Empress directly dove into the ice on the ground to hide. At almost the same time that the 4 of them disappeared, Yu Qianqiu let out a furious roar, and his entire body exploded with a ferocious 7-colored flame. In an instant, it covered a radius of 1,000 meters. A ray of 7-colored light that illuminated the heaven and earth was like a resplendent pearl, blooming with gorgeous colors in the vast snowy mountain. Bai Qi, who was fighting fiercely with Hong Tailong, was already quite shocked. He actually discovered that Hong Tailong's cultivation was far stronger than before. Because he didn't know that the Myriad Swords demon monarch had used the divine dragon empowerment technique to return half of Hong Tailong's cultivation to him before he died, he didn't have the time to notice that Hong Tailong had already made the first move. In addition, Hong Tailong's dragon body, which belonged to the dragon race, was extremely resistant to attacks. He actually withstood the black light shot out by the obsidian light mirror without caring about anything else. He only attacked without defending, completely throwing caution to the wind. It was as if he was fighting with his life on the line. Bai Qi really couldn't endure his opponent's ferocious attacks. Just when Bai Qi was preparing to endure a little longer and wait for the Silver Armor Army and the other three to kill Yu Qianqiu, they would come over to help relieve the pressure on Bai Qi. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of the huge seven-colored flame blossoming below, and immediately cried out in surprise, "True Samadhi fire." Taking advantage of Bai Qi's daze, Hong Tailong seized the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. He opened his mouth, and two rays of golden light shot out. Two dragon binding chains, one bound Bai Qi's legs, and the other bound his upper body. In the blink of an eye, Bai Qi was tied up tightly. No matter how hard Bai Qi struggled, he couldn't escape. Bai Qi was instantly scared out of his wits. Hong Tailong angrily shouted, "Violent dragon fist." Countless monstrous fist shadows gathered at one point and violently smashed onto Bai Qi's body. Bai Qi couldn't even let out a scream as he violently vomited blood. Boom! A huge deep pit was formed on the vast snowy ground. Hong Tailong rushed into the deep pit on the ground and didn't stop there. True Samadhi fire. The Silver Armor Army and the other three cried out in surprise before Bai Qi. They were caught off guard and were engulfed by the exploding seven-colored flame. The blue armor heavenly soldier had his bow drawn in the air, and since he was standing a little further away, he was able to dodge the attack with instantaneous movement. However, the Silver Armor Army and the other two who attacked Bai Qi were unlucky. They repeatedly teleported to avoid the flames that were chasing after them. After much difficulty, they finally escaped the flames that were chasing after them. However, they discovered that the weapons they attacked were stained with true Samadhi fire. This true fire could refine anything. Once it was stained, it would be a huge problem. They couldn't extinguish it no matter how hard they tried. They immediately threw away their weapons without hesitation, and the three treasures became useless on the spot. Chapter 1178. The iceberg where the ice palace was located melted instantly, not into water, but into steam. Wherever the true Samadhi fire reached, and even further away, was filled with smoke and mist. The blue-armored celestial soldier who had just fled immediately noticed Bai Qi's terrible condition. He cried out in grief, "Emperor of Netherworld." He turned around and shot the soul-slaying arrow at Hong Tailong, who was beating Bai Qi. Yu Qianqiu was nowhere to be seen amidst the rapidly dispersing mist and the colorful flame. But suddenly, Yu Qianqiu's furious roar rang out, "Kill!" Tens of thousands of golden specks of light shot out from the blazing flames, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. In order to save the Emperor of the Underworld, the blue-armored celestial soldiers who had drawn their bows and shot arrows furiously didn't care about their own lives. Instead of dodging the rain-like attacks of the divine swords, they braced themselves and turned around to shoot the arrow at Hong Tailong. As soon as the arrow was shot out, a dozen indestructible golden light specks pierced through his body, almost turning him into a sieve. The soul-slaying bow in his hand was cut into a few pieces by the rapidly piercing divine swords, making a buzzing noise as the bowstring was broken. Tens of blood spurted out from the blue-armored celestial soldier's body. Although he tried to choke back something with a reluctant expression, he still choked out a mouthful of blood. His head tilted to one side, and he fell straight down to the snowland below. Silver-armored celestial soldier and his two companions, who had hastily dodged the divine swords, turned around and saw this scene. Immediately, they let out a deafening howl, "Celestial army!" At this moment, Hong Tailong dashed out from the deep crater with a bloody man in his hand. The soul-slaying arrow brushed past his shoulder. Boom! The ground shook, and the snowland cracked. The colorful flame covering 1,000 meters on the snowland shrank rapidly, and a man made of fire dashed out. Behind him, tens of thousands of golden light specks circled like a shoal of fish in the ocean. Hong Tai Long carried Bai Qi, who was already on the verge of death. His white clothes dyed in blood, and was still tightly bound by the dragon-binding rope. He flashed to Yu Qianzhou's side, handed him over, and said, "Take him, I've already sealed his cultivation." Then, he turned to look at the three dumbfounded people in the distance and sneered, "Leave those three fellows who helped the evildoer to me." Yu Qianzhou retracted his true samadhi fire and reached out to grab the dragon-binding rope. He looked coldly at Bai Qi, who was beaten up beyond recognition, and casually lifted him up. He wouldn't have the slightest bit of sympathy for him. This was a life-and-death battle. If he lost today, his ending wouldn't be any better. Other than death, they might even hand him over to Yan Zhuixing. That was why it was said that showing mercy to the enemy was equivalent to committing suicide. "Wait!" Yu Qianzhou called out to Hong Tai Long. His eyes narrowed as he swept a glance at the three people in the distance. He felt a little strange in his heart. If the three of them had split up and fled, Hong Tai Long might not have been able to capture all of them. It would already be good if he could capture two of them. However, the three of them did not flee. Instead, they were looking at him with grief and indignation. Hong Tai Long looked at him in confusion and asked, "Are we going to let them go?" Yu Qianzhou didn't reply to him. He stretched out his other hand and a divine sword flashed into his hand. He placed the sword on Bai Qi's neck expressionlessly and shouted at the three people, "If anyone dares to flee, I will immediately cut off his head. If you don't want him to die, then obediently surrender. I can consider letting you guys live." "No." Hong Tai Long roared angrily, "I can let them go, but he must die." He pointed his finger at Bai Qi. From the looks of it, he still held a grudge against Yi Tiankong. "Why don't I hand him over to you, and you can do whatever you want to do? After you're done, you can go back to your hometown, and I'll go do my own thing. From now on, we won't have anything to do with each other." Yu Qianzhou looked at him and sneered. Hong Tai Long clenched his fists tightly and angrily turned his head away. "Yu Qianzhou, you have to keep your word." The silver-armored army of 1,000 soldiers' sorrowful voice came from afar. "I, Yu Qianzhou, am famous for being a man of my word. What I say is already set in stone. Have you ever heard of me, Yu Qianzhou, going back on my word?" Yu Qianzhou grabbed Bai Qi and placed the sword on his neck. He shouted back, "As long as you guys answer my questions honestly and promise to serve me from now on, I can let you guys go." The silver-armored army of 1,000 soldiers and the other two looked at each other with a bitter smile, then nodded in unison and slowly flew over. Yu Qianzhou tilted his head and said, "Hong Tai Long, go seal their cultivation bases." Seeing the three flying over, Bai Qi's eyes, which had already lost focus, once again lit up. His chest, which had almost been smashed, suddenly heaved up and down, and a large mouthful of blocked blood spurted out of his mouth. Staring at the three flying over with bloodshot eyes, he desperately roared in pain, "Run! Run! Don't worry about me. Don't believe his nonsense. Hurry up and go. I beg you guys." Yu Qianzhou didn't stop Bai Qi from shouting. He pretended to be merciful to the three people. The three people looked at Bai Qi's pitiful appearance. Who could have imagined that the Emperor of the Underworld, who was so graceful in the Underworld Royal Palace, would end up like this? The three men, who were made of iron, instantly burst into tears. They stubbornly shook their heads and refused. It was the first time in their lives that they refused the Emperor of the Underworld's command. They didn't expect it to be under such circumstances. The three people didn't leave. Instead, they sped up and flew over. Bai Qi's face instantly swelled, and tears of blood came out of his eyes. He screamed in pain, "Don't come over. Run." His voice was so miserable that it was like a ghost being thrown into a pot of boiling oil. Originally, Hong Tai Long hated Bai Qi to the bone. However, when he saw that Bai Qi was willing to give up his only hope of survival for the sake of his subordinates, he could not help but be moved. He cast a deep look at Bai Qi, who was crying tears of blood, and teleported to the front of Silver Armor Army and the other two without any hesitation. With a lightning-fast move, he quickly sealed their cultivations and brought them over. Seeing that the situation was under control, Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and put away the 10,000 swords as one. He carried Bai Qi, who was badly mutilated, and landed on the ice field and threw him to the ground. Hong Tailong also threw the three people to the ground. The three people climbed up and wanted to help Bai Qi, who was still being helped. However, their cultivation was sealed, and they couldn't help Bai Qi, who was weighed down by the dragon binding rope. They fell down one by one, climbed up one by one, and fell down one by one. At this moment, the ice mountain that the ice palace was built on had melted. The Snow Emperor and Snow Empress, who had hidden far away, also came back. The Snow Empress was still carrying her unconscious daughter. The two of them were also frightened by the fierce battle, but Yu Qianzhou's true Samadhi fire attracted them. Once the battle ended, they immediately rushed back. They saw hope to save their daughter, because Yu Qianzhou had promised them. Let him go. We have already stretched out our necks to be killed. You have already sealed his cultivation, why don't you let him go? The Silver Armor Army roared at Hong Tailong, even if you want to kill him, there is no need to treat him like this. He was once the Supreme Emperor of the Netherworld, and he has his own dignity. At least when the Myriad Swords Demon Lord died, no one humiliated him. The three people were really powerless to help Bai Qi up. Without their cultivation, the ice under their feet was slippery. There was no expression on Hong Tailong's face. For some unknown reason, he actually opened his mouth and swallowed the dragon binding rope that was binding Bai Qi back into his stomach. Without the weight of the dragon binding rope, Bai Qi choked out another mouthful of blood when the three people helped him up. He looked at the three people and shook his head with boundless grief and indignation. Why are you all so stupid? We have no value to him now. Do you all really think that he will let us go? We know that there is no way out. The Purple Armor Army suddenly laughed bitterly and said, but we are already used to going through life and death with you. We have been like this for so many years. Moreover, all of our lives were saved by you. You have never let us down, and you have always treated us well. How can we bear to leave you behind? Bai Qi closed his eyes, and tears of blood flowed out from his eyes. Suddenly, he opened his eyes angrily and tilted his head to look at Yu Qianzhou. He gritted his teeth and said, Yu Qianzhou, what will make you let them go? Yu Qianzhou looked at him coldly and didn't answer his question. Instead, he said indifferently, actually, before you attacked me that time, I didn't have any ill will towards you. I just don't understand. Could it be that just because Mu Yuanzi injured you, you're going to open the demon world and let all the beings of the three realms die with you? Bai Qi's struggling body softened, and he lay in the arms of the Silver Armor Army of 1,000 soldiers. He laughed wildly and said, why? I also want to know why. I once led my subordinates to risk their lives for the sake of all living beings in the three realms. I risked my life to seal the demon realm with King Jintai. For the sake of all living beings in the three realms, I've always suppressed Kim Tae and prevented him from acting recklessly. For so many years, I've always warned Kim Tae that if he dared to disturb the balance of the three realms, I would lead the heroes of the Netherworld to beat him up. Otherwise, do you think that inhumane fellow would really treat everyone in the world as humans? Let me ask you, who has ever heard of the three realms not being in chaos for 100,000 years? But why? Bai Qi retorted angrily, why do I have to bear the retribution for Master Jin's evil deed of killing the entire Wu family? Why did Mu Yuanzi injure me instead of dealing with the main culprit? Why do all the beings in the three realms turn against me when I'm working for the welfare of the three realms? Not a single person, not even a single person stood out to speak for me. Since the entire world is filled with heartless people, if I don't see rivers of heartless people's blood flow, why should I live in sorrow? Why should I die in sorrow? Then let me tell you why. Because there is no why. No matter how good you think you are, it's all because you think you are. Everything is retribution. If you can't figure it out, you can slowly think about it in your next life. Yu Qianqiu said as he took out a divine sword. Hong Tailong was slightly startled. Didn't you want to let him go? Why does it look like you want to kill me? Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu and the Silver Armor army of 1,000 soldiers were negotiating terms because he didn't want to leave behind any future troubles that might suddenly pop up one day to take revenge. Thus, he purposely led the three of them to surrender so that they wouldn't slip through the net. To him, if he didn't kill a single one and let them all go, then he would be a good person. Since he was going to kill them, he would have to eliminate them completely. Moreover, Bai Qi was already a member of the Devil Dao. He had once sworn to the heavens at the 1,000-mile lake that he would exterminate the Devil Dao and sacrifice all living beings in the demon domain. Chapter 1179. Right at this moment, the Snow Empress suddenly flashed over. She braced herself and cupped her hands with a bitter smile. I know you want the Xianming's soul refining technique. If you let go of the Emperor of the Underworld, I am willing to give it to you. The Snow Empress, who was carrying Shui Linglong, looked at them worriedly. She was afraid that her husband had angered Yu Qianqiu. After all, Hong Tailong and Yu Qianqiu were very powerful, especially Yu Qianqiu's Samadhi True Fire, which was the nemesis of the couple's cultivation method. More importantly, she was afraid that angering Yu Qianqiu would mean giving up the chance to cure her daughter. However, they were indebted to Bai Qi. Although she felt uncomfortable holding back some words, she couldn't say them out loud. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the couple, then slowly raised the divine sword in his hand and gently caressed the glowing edge of the sword. Snow Emperor, we had an agreement. I saved your daughter's life, and you gave me the Xianming soul refining technique in exchange. Now, you want to use it to exchange for Bai Qi's life. You better think carefully. The Xianming soul refining technique can only exchange for one person's life. Whether it is Bai Qi or your daughter, it's up to you. The Snow Emperor lowered his head solemnly. The Snow Empress looked at her daughter in her arms, then at her husband, her face full of anxiety. Bai Qi struggled for a while, and the three understood and helped him up. Facing the Snow Emperor, Bai Qi was very gratified and nodded. I appreciate Brother Snow's righteousness. With Brother Snow's words, I can die without regrets. My friendship with Brother Snow was not in vain. However, the four of us are destined to live and die together today. I will not live alone, or it will be worse than death. So, please don't interfere in this matter. This has nothing to do with you and your wife. Emperor of the Underworld. The Snow Emperor wanted to say something, but Bai Qi had already turned to look at Yu Qianqiu, who was ignoring him, and sighed, I didn't expect this. Yu Qianqiu, who didn't even dare to speak loudly in front of me, was now in control of my life and death. It seems that the Saintess is indeed a prophet. I had already vaguely figured out some of it, but in the end, I still made a mistake. I can't blame others for my fate. You're right, everything is retribution. Netherworld Saintess? Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and lowered the sword in his hand. He tilted his head and asked, She told you about me? A bitter smile appeared on Bai Qi's bloody face, and his eyes became blurry. He recalled the conversation he had with the Underworld Saintess in the small courtyard of the Dark Royal Palace. He closed his eyes slightly and said, Yu Qianqiu. Back then, I wanted to kill you first. Killing me today is my retribution. However, I treated you well back then. Promise me one thing. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said faintly, Let's hear it first. Now that things had come to this, he wouldn't give in so easily. A warm expression appeared on Bai Qi's face as he said, Don't let the news of my death spread. That's all I want. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He asked with some surprise, You're already dead, yet you still care about the waves behind you. I want to know why. Is it worth it for me to promise you? Wan Ling's figure appeared in Bai Qi's mind. He had protected the entire 10,000 holy palace from the Demon King 3 nights. After rescuing Wan Ling, he and Wan Ling had an intimate time together. When they parted, he had said that he would come back to pick her up after finishing his business. Who would have thought that it would be an eternal farewell? He let out a soft sigh and closed his eyes as he replied, "If she doesn't know that I'm dead, she will naturally live on. I have nothing left for her. The only thing I can give her now is to give her the hope to live on." Everyone else was confused, but Yu Qianqiu seemed to be deep in thought. He had already linked it to Wan Ling. He paused and said, "I can promise you this. I originally wanted to use the Xian Ming soul refining technique to refine you all into profound weapons. As you said, on account of the kindness you have shown me, I will give the four of you a quick death. From now on, the grudges between us will be resolved, and we will not owe each other anything." As soon as he finished speaking, a golden light flashed in his hand. With four pu sounds, four heads bounced up and fell to the ground. Warm blood spurted out from their mouths. The four corpses fell to the ground and twitched for a while before they stopped moving. The blood that flowed out from the severed heads quickly solidified on the icy ground. Hong Tai Long looked at Yu Qianqiu as he silently put away the divine sword in his hand. Previously, he had thought that he would let them go. He didn't expect that he would not leave a single one alive. Hong Tai Long wanted to say something, but he didn't know what to say. The Snow Empress and her husband looked at Bai Chi's corpse dumbfoundedly. Suddenly, a ball of 7-colored flames swept across, and there was nothing left on the ground. Even the blood had turned into ashes. Yu Qianqiu turned around and walked towards the husband and wife. He stopped in front of the Snow Empress who was carrying Shui Linglong, and said indifferently, "Snow Empress, I have always remembered the promise I made in the past. Today, I have come to fulfill it." He stretched out his 5 claws and grabbed towards Shui Linglong. Not long after, a strand of 7-colored flame that was not much thicker than a strand of hair emerged from Shui Linglong's body. It was this little fellow that caused the Snow Empress and her husband to be helpless even with all their efforts. That strand of flame drilled into Yu Qianqiu's palm. Shui Linglong, who was still unconscious, let out a soft moan. Her body that was being carried moved slightly, and the sickly redness on her cheeks gradually disappeared. The husband and wife looked at their daughter who was recovering quickly, but they didn't feel the slightest bit happy. The Snow Empress raised her head and saw that Yu Qianqiu was staring at her with a burning gaze. She couldn't help but smile bitterly and shake her head. She took out a jade archive and quickly inserted something into it, then flicked it out. Yu Qianqiu casually caught the jade archive and examined it. After thinking for a long time, he nodded slightly and said, "So that's how it is. I understand now." The jade archive was immediately crushed into pieces. In fact, the Xianming soul refining technique wasn't a technique that required a large amount of time to practice. It was a technique that condensed all of the opponent's cultivation into the essence of the technique and used it. It required a spiritual object that was connected to the user, so that the user could control it. No matter what type of spiritual object was used, the user would need the same type as the medium to unleash its power. This was the reason why the Snow Empress said that Yu Qianqiu couldn't practice without absorbing the fire spirit. After understanding the secret of the Xianming soul refining technique, Yu Qianqiu was confident that he could use it on the 5 elements of water, fire, metal, wood, and earth. Of course, the prerequisite was that he had to swallow all 5 spirits of heaven and earth. The Snow Empress would never have imagined that Yu Qianqiu had mastered all 5 elements of the technique. This was also the reason why Yu Qianqiu was so interested in the Xianming soul refining technique. As long as he mastered it, he would be able to summon an almost unkillable dark soldier in any terrain in the future. The Snow Empress and her husband didn't have anything to be happy about when their daughter's worries were resolved. They held their daughter and left with flagging interest. Now that the ice palace was destroyed, they suffered a great loss. The ice soul mysterious ice, which was refined by many experts, was destroyed by Yu Qianqiu's Samadhi true fire. But they didn't say anything and left. They wanted to find a suitable place to rebuild the ice palace in the snowy mountain. After today's scene, they saw Yu Qianqiu's ruthlessness. It was hard for them, who had always been aloof from worldly affairs, to accept it. They probably didn't want to have anything to do with Yu Qianqiu anymore. At least in their opinion, Bai Qi was much more affectionate and righteous. Yu Qianqiu stood silently on the ice field and watched the couple leave. He stood for a long time in the howling cold wind. After a long time, he looked up at the dark night sky and sighed. I thought I would become friends with them, but I knew it was impossible when I decided to kill Bai Qi. All these years, in order to do some things, I gained a lot, but I also lost too many precious things. What is the most precious? The human heart is the most precious. The people I was familiar with left me one by one. Some died, some left, and there's no turning back. Maybe when I gain more, I will also lose more. Hong Tailong also couldn't accept the fact that he killed Bai Qi and the other 3 people. Although he was the one who shouted the loudest to kill Bai Qi, after hearing Yu Qianqiu's sigh, he seemed to understand his helplessness. After all, which person didn't have a story behind them? Everyone had been honest before, and maybe everyone had a touching story. But this was a life and death cultivation. There was more than one person like Bai Qi in the world. Who could carry so many burdens on their shoulders? If they didn't get rid of them quickly, there would only be more and more burdens, and nothing could be done. Just as Hong Tailong was about to say a few words of consolation, he discovered that Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath and became spirited again. He immediately came back to life from his loneliness and disappeared in a flash. His recovery speed was too fast. It was as if he was a completely different person, as if nothing had happened earlier. After Yu Qianqiu searched around the icy plains, he found Bai Qi's treasure, the obsidian underworld light mirror. He tried to control it, but discovered that it was impervious to fire and water. Even his divine sense couldn't penetrate it. It seemed like there was no possibility for him to control it. Hong Tailong flashed to his side and sneered, "Don't try anymore." The obsidian underworld light mirror is the symbol of the netherworld's supreme ruler. Other than meditation cultivators, no one from the outside world is able to control it. There's such a strange thing. Yu Qianqiu flipped it around and looked at it. Then, he put it away with some regret. This thing could communicate with each other through a video call. It was a pity that he couldn't use such a high-grade treasure. Where should we go now? To sweep across the demonic path's army in the netherworld, or to slaughter in the immortal realm? Hong Tailong rubbed his palms together. He couldn't wait to prove to the 3 realms that he, Hong Tailong, had returned. Yu Qianqiu lowered his head and calculated for a while. He muttered to himself, looking at the time, "It's about time. I wonder if that fellow, Shen Yu, will keep his promise." Then, he suddenly raised his head and said, "My master doesn't know about the human realm being sealed. I want to report to him first." "Your master? Where?" Hong Tailong was stunned. Yu Qianqiu had already waved his hand, and the 2 of them disappeared from where they stood. By the netherworld river beside the myriad heavens boundary barrier, the 2 of them appeared. Hong Tailong quickly looked around and asked hesitantly, "This is? You're finally here?" A woman's clear voice rang out. The 2 of them looked at the other side of the river. The netherworld saintess slowly walked out from the ground. It seemed like she had opened up an underground space for herself. Hong Tailong was a little surprised and wanted to ask, "Is this your master?" Yu Qianqiu was also a little surprised as he asked, "Why are you here?" You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.